Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the canon, the High Republic of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am coming to you from the Underworld North Studios here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I am joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I am doing good. I got this new light for my computer. I can already tell it's making it much better. So yay, happy with
There
the
we go.
lighting
There
for
we go.
once.
Right on. Yeah, this week, yes, we're going to talk about that trailer that dropped this afternoon, which will tie in well to our main topic, playing in the sandbox, which often involves picking up characters that were developed in other media by other authors already with substantive story arcs. And we explore the implications of that. We talk. This is a paper and screen relationship conversation, very timely, going at the lens of characters and character continuity and character stories across the range of media genres and creatives in the canon of the galaxy far, far away. Let's get the plugs out of the way first. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Ion Cannon Pod, at EYEONCANONPOD. Here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, we got YouTube memberships, so feel free to sign up and give us support the channel, support the network, support our podcast as well. Super chats are also on the Underworld YouTube channel. Can give us some sweet shekels. I should say shekels. American dollars, I guess it is. And yeah, shekels is a
I'll
figure of
take a
speech,
hay
guys.
penny.
Hey, penny. Shekels of Republic credits, Imperial credits. We take it all.
That Moncala.
Moncala, yeah. Yes, and if you do give us a super chat, we'll definitely get to your comment. Of course, we'll do our best to get to every comment, but definitely with the super chat. Also, the Underworld Discord server, link in the description below. Chatting all sorts of things: Star Wars, Marvel, Star Trek. Again, that trailer, other things happening in all sorts of fandom across the board. There's even a section for the Venn diagram, the Star Wars Venn diagram, or soccer Venn diagram, I should say. So, if you go to a soccer game and you tag me in it in the Venn diagram column, I will like it and I will enjoy it. But speaking of the Discord, Joel, what's happening in the Discord these few weeks?
Last Friday we continued our Star Wars watch marathon with some good old fashioned young Jedi adventures, and we saw some Jedi vectors on screen. So that was fun. I think not this week, but next week we'll be having a game night. Which I will actually have to put a voting thing. So you vote as soon as I set that up to vote for what game you want to play.
I love democracy. Isn't democracy great?
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, so definitely check that out. Fun times had by all. Something that I think started in the pandemic that's just continued on because good things can continue on from there. Digital connectivity across across the continent, across the globe. Speaking of plugs, one last plug to get through. Tractor Beam Comics reviews every Wednesday. Chris Abbott and I take the comics that came out that week. We read them that day and then we talk about them. Say this is what we think. Star Wars comics specifically. This week got an exciting week coming up. High Republic Adventures #2 and Thrawn Alliance's #1 is coming out with that epic cover that is kind of like I guess it's the San Diego Comic-Con variant of the Thrawn Alliance's cover. They're making a comic book cover of that as well. So the comic book adaptation is by Tim Zahn and Jody Houser. So that should be interesting thing to see how they can fit that into 4 issues. We'll find out with issue #1 coming out this Wednesday, and that'll be fun. All right. Speaking of things we do, so I should mention that is right here on the Underworld channel and all the Underworld socials and Iron Cannon socials, etc. So stay right here and check that out. Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Star Wars, and Wednesdays are for comics. Comics are for Wednesdays, and so that's when we do it, when we talk. So stay tuned for that.
And only Wednesdays. No other days are allowed for comics.
That's going to change. We're going to talk about comics on Monday, Joel.
Oh, that's true. We are
today.
That's true. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
All right. This week in Star Wars, things we did this week, things we're thinking about. What are you thinking about? What did you end up doing this week, Joel?
Yes. This has a little bit of tie into what we're going to talk about later, but it's a little something different as well. I always feel that we as Star Wars fans focus a little too much on the concept or the premise of something
Hmm.
and get so excited by that. We never really stop to think about the creatives behind the premise or the creatives attached to said premise.
Hmm.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a, I'm going to play a little bit of a mental game with you, Matthew, and
All right.
let's
I like
let's let's
games, I think.
let's see if and kind of prove this little theory to the test. Okay,
Okay.
so just pretend you haven't seen any Star Wars movie. We're back in 2013. They're just announcing Star Wars movie. We all think they're going to come out.
Right.
So
The new Star Wars, because I'm going to do more time travel for mine, but go ahead.
okay, all right. So Lucasfilm announced the first two movies you're going to see. You're going to see a Dawn of the Jedi original movie and a young Han Solo film. So just by those two films alone, which one are you more excited about?
Dawn of the Jedi.
All right.
Not even close.
Now let's pick it. Now let's try. Now let's reframe the question. Dawn of the Jedi film, written and directed by J.J. Abrams. A young Han Solo film, written and directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. Now, which one are you more excited for?
Shoot, that's hard. Because so interesting note about that. I'm doing my How I Met Your Mother rewatch, and
nice.
I mean Phil Lord and Chris Miller. My third rewatch. Phil Lord and Chris Miller are heavily involved in that, right? I forget to what extent, but young Han Solo, yeah. Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, like directed, written by JJ. You know, I mean, I get your point. I get your point.
But that's what the point I'm trying to get at is like, we always think about the concept. I'm saying it's okay to be excited by just the concept. Don't get me wrong. Sure. I think it's valid, but I also think that we have to consider as well who's making this, who are the writers, who are the creators behind this as well, and that's going to greatly affect both, what we get, and and also can affect your excitement, like because everyone's going to bring something different. A Tony Gilroy Mandalorian movie is different from a Jon Favreau one.
Yeah. I will still say Dawn of the Jedi. Let's see what happens with it. Just because again, but you're right. My enthusiasm for it definitely waned and changed. I'm gonna fix my camera here, guys. Bear with me. My enthusiasm for it definitely waned and changed when you mentioned JJ. I know that's harsh, but it's who is gonna think more deeply and think more. What I mean by that? Who is going to have a level of engagement with Star Wars that is appropriate to the subject matter that they're doing, right? And you're right. I mean, Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I mean, that their whatever their idea for Solo was probably pretty great. It just
I wish they had both written and directed Solo instead of gotten the Kasdans. I think you would have gotten a really good young Solo film. So, but that's sort of like I think we have to think about the creators involved too. It's sort of like use Acolyte. I mean, you can be excited for High Republic, but if High Republic hasn't been your bag for because of the books or whatever, you can still be. I think there's still some validity to be excited for it because Leslie Headland has done some pretty good TV in her time. So. I know people who aren't that high on High Republic, high on High Republic. That High Republic, but it's sort of like
there's that joke, Joel. Just like,
but there's still
in the Star Wars Underworld to make that joke.
Oh, sorry, but it's still, but Acolyte, they're still excited for Acolyte because, well, the premise is kind of cool. Let's not be around the bush there, but also Leslie Headland's just a really good creative person. I mean, I heard nothing but interesting things about Russian Doll. I've never seen Russian Doll, so it's not like I can really speak for myself. But that factors, or even Andor, like I was excited for a Cassian Andor show from the get-go, but I think the original showrunner, it would have been interesting to see what he did, but I'm glad at the end of the day Tony Gilroy came in because I think he's so talented, and also because and also because of the connection he's making to Rogue One, and then finally to kind of get us to the next thing coming up. Bad Batch could have just been a boring, like, here's the A team of Star Wars, but with Jennifer Corbett being the showrunner and the team she assembled, I think that turns this show into something very special, which we'll hopefully see the fruits of very soon. Well, we will because it's February. But that is sort of my little PSA to Star Wars fans. Yeah, it's okay to be excited for a concept. Don't get me wrong, but also look at the people behind it as well, and maybe that should inform your. Keep informed of your
Yeah,
of your
it's going to
decision.
affect your response.
Yeah.
I mean, and to your point, it does go the other direction, right?
Oh yeah.
Concept you're not necessarily interested in. Like there are people like just imagine Quentin Tarantino got to do a Star Trek film. I mean,
Mhm.
I'd watch it because it's Star Trek,
Right.
but people would watch it because it's Quentin Tarantino. I'm sure people watched the Star Trek musical episode, the Discovery or Stranger Worlds musical episode,
Mhm.
because it was a musical episode. You know, even if
Yeah.
Star Trek isn't their jam. So yeah, those different things can play into it.
Mhm.
There are people who probably hate that episode because they're not into musicals. So yeah, I mean that's also part of the concept of that episode. I mean, we're talking about
Right.
Star Trek. I know this isn't an April Fool's thing. We're not intentionally making it a Star
No.
Trek, but yeah, it's a great point. And
Mhm.
and to your point, it's at least in terms of what we know about a creative already, and that's just it, right?
Right.
I'm trying to think, you know. I mean, I'm sure it works on the book side too.
Oh
In
yeah,
the
yeah.
industry, it definitely works. And it's definitely how it is. It's why if Lucasfilm knows, I mean, this is definitely with books for sure. If Lucasfilm knows, you know, and Random House Worlds and Disney Publishing them know you can write a good Star Wars and you work well and you work on time and you take edits well, just the different professionalism aspects of professionalism,
Mhm.
then they'll turn to you, then they'll go to you. I mean, it's why you see a lot of Marvel actors showing up in Star Wars and vice versa too,
I mean,
right?
I'll use the book side for a second
Yeah,
because I kind of forgot about that. Like they Marvel announces Darth Vader. It's like again, we've had 20 of these,
yeah,
but Darth Vader written by Claudia Gray.
yep,
All right, I'm a lot more interested in that. So it's like okay, that's a lot more interesting than just here's another random Darth Vader comic for the fifth
yeah.
time this week.
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I do think we do talk about who this is by and who this is with,
Oh yeah.
especially those who are in the know. And that's the thing is
Mhm.
maybe what you're part of what you're getting at is get more in. We should all get more in the know about who's doing what and when. That initial thing that you really got me with that.
Right. I know.
Dawn of the
I
Jedi by
I
James Cameron.
I knew how to I knew exactly what to ask, so I've been thinking about this for a while, so
Yeah, that's fair. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm turning a corner on Force Awakens. I get it. It's fine, but yeah. Anyways, yeah. Is that what you got?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Speaking of which, speaking of going back in time, as I mentioned, I went back in time to 1977. I popped into a time machine
70s, man.
in the 70s. There was I put on my bell bottoms and I grew my hair out into an afro. No, I'm just kidding. On Friday we went to for this.
Disco.
Yes, we did National Popcorn Day. Went to an indie theater and watched this indie art pop film from 1977 called Star Wars. No, it was a New Hope. It was the version you can see on Disney Plus. It's the only version Lucasfilm was obviously gonna send out, but it was in a nice, really nice indie theater
Mhm.
just here in our neighborhood, and yeah, we went and really um I'm trying to think, what a few things that stood out. First of all, this is the first time I had seen A New Hope in a theater since the special editions. I hadn't had an opportunity to since then. So that was just an experience in itself. It was a great crowd, full house, everything. Yeah, and just seeing the scale of the Star Destroyer, seeing even the scale of Vader and how menacing he is, how talkative he is, even though he only has 11 minutes or whatever. Um, how funny that film is. I forgot how funny that film is. When you're in a crowd where people are laughing and enjoying it, there's that energy, that buzz. Um, yeah, and then just yeah, how funny it is and how moving it is, and the score. You hear it, you experience it. I gotta say, Joel, you and Dom are right. Star Wars is primarily meant to be a film experience, and it's sad to say that. It pains me to admit I was wrong, but also to say, hey, I'm looking forward to enjoying what's coming down the pipe even more. Just going back into its original home and its original uh, context. and to actually experience that, yeah, it really made it come alive as a theater film experience. And that's
Oh, I
the
can
thing
see.
about the way technology evolves.
Mhm.
Then the way we talk about how in a streaming series or in a novel, there's so much more time to develop characters and develop storylines. Dom and I were talking about before. Um, I think we were talking about Mandalorian and Grogu and how much development they can fit into that they could have fit into a streaming series, and that's what I was into a season of a streaming series, and that's what I was concerned about. But a well-told film is a narrative unit in itself by definition, and so uh, yeah, like A New Hope, I'd say Revenge of the Sith is a masterpiece as well. I'd love to see that, and I haven't seen that in theaters in years either. So
I would love to. If I saw one, honestly, I would love to see Empire Strikes Back.
we saw that 2 years ago. There was kind of this
Ooh, lucky.
COVID loosening special,
Nice.
COVID restrictions loosening special a little bit. Yeah, that's true. That's another one of you just notice different things, you can experience different things because it's a different medium than sitting here on your screen. And home TVs are a lot bigger and a lot better now, but it's still not the same as a darkened theater full of with a couple hundred people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was just a fun trip back. One thing I noticed, I noticed a few things whenever I watch A New Hope, and I don't watch it all the time, but whenever I do, I try to think, okay, what's it like before all this lore is built in? Right? What's it like, even if George had named all these characters, these Gloopshitos or whatever, what's it like just to enjoy the weirdness of it and the strangeness of it, but also the way he was able to merge the weird, strange, goofy Buck Rogers serial with the artistic indie. I'm trying to give an example. Well, THX 1138, or all the films the art films that he grew up with and he learned on. I mean, he grew up with Buck Rogers, but to merge the pop with the auteur, it's the first real synthesis of those, and that's probably why it takes off, because it's both fun and resonates so deeply and is so meaningful, and yet it's fun. And that's what I've always said about Star Wars at its best, is grown-up themes in a package that kids can actually engage with and be accessible to. And so even before we understand these deep themes about destiny and meaning and courage, we take to them, even if we don't fully understand them. We still take them because they're given to us in this fun, exciting adventure. And so Star Wars at its best is able to capture both at the same time. So like Andor doesn't bother, it doesn't need to. I think Last Jedi doesn't necessarily need to. Revenge of the Sith doesn't.
I think Last Jedi actually is more true to Star Wars, to that than
sure, but it isn't necessarily the fun swashbuckling adventure that
there's some fun swashbuckling in there. I think
it's got some of it. It's got some of it, but it's still, it leans a little more on the auteur side, whereas Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker definitely lean towards the fun adventure side, which is fun.
I don't agree with the auteur thing. I think that the difference, because what about Empire? That's technically not auteur. That's technically
that's another perfect blend, perfect synthesis of the two.
I mean, I think maybe you got. I don't agree with your definition on what auteur is, but that's a whole other thing. But
maybe we need to define that fine. But
I will say, that's the thing I love about New Hope is that I think it's the Star Wars film you can look at from several different angles, and they're all valid. Yeah. So you can look at it just an individual film and kind of take it on its own terms. You can look at it as the start of the original trilogy, part 1 of 3. The one in the middle, the of the original 6 movie saga. Even more in the middle with the 9 movie saga. True. Kind of the tipping point. And then it's kind of the wider Star Wars universe where Rogue One just happened a few moments ago. True. And it's all kind of fits together.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is at some points, so I watched it, what is this before all the the lore is filled out, but some things I just couldn't.
Mhm.
Right when Obi-Wan is Ben is I keep calling him Obi-Wan, and Ben is talking to Luke about the Clone Wars and about Anakin Vader. We know he is not telling the full truth, but the emotion of it. I felt the emotion. I felt this show, this Clone Wars series. Well, the bond that they have. We have in Revenge of the Sith, where when Obi-Wan's on the Venator there about to leave, that he was a very dear friend. I felt that. I have that ingrained now, and so
I feel I.
yeah,
Or what about my favorite moment is
yeah,
when Obi-Wan about to kill himself and kind of gives like Luke this kind of
yeah,
look. Do you now think like he's looking at both Luke and Leia? It's like the twins are reunited at last, and obviously
maybe.
really you didn't feel that
Yeah.
from Kenobi.
I Yeah, I mean that is just in the moment. It didn't enter into my mind. You can definitely read that. You can definitely see that for sure.
I thought you would like Kenobi. I
Yeah,
thought Kenobi would affect you too, because like now
I guess
Leia
in
knows
that moment I was thinking more in terms of yeah, I mean everything we know about Force Ghosts. I mean that's the thing about
what.
and I mean that's because in the story of A New Hope we don't have that built up as much. So um,
Oh,
yeah,
really? Nothing about the Leia Obi-Wan connection,
it just didn't come to mind. I can see it for sure.
right?
Deborah Chow did a fantastic job of developing that, but uh, I agree with you.
Okay.
It just in the moment when watching it, different things you think of different things, right?
I mean, that's fair. We all
Absolutely.
think of a different thing
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, that's always an interesting. A
Mhm.
New Hope was sort of the most interesting, I think, of all the films to watch. From
Mhm.
like, what do you want your brain to focus on,
Yeah,
kind of
that's
thing.
true. That's a good point. One last thing, because it's the Disney Plus version, it definitely had McClunky in it. I was the only one who was like, yes. I think no. I mean, Dom, give a chuckle. Nobody else really got it. I'm excited about it. That was funny. I
That's
love that moment. I really do. It's just so goofy and ridiculous. And the whole story behind it. So just that's the Disney Plus thing. So yeah, it was a great event. Whenever you get a chance to see a Star Wars in a theater, I mean, I think I got to take it.
I
Yeah,
also think it's just good because I'm going to be honest. Imagine this. I don't want to make this too much of our time,
yeah,
but I feel like we don't rewatch things a lot.
true. No, it's a good point. Yeah, I don't rewatch
And
enough either. I mean,
we're
I'm
always
watching I Met Your Mother for the fourth time, which is a very Star Warsy. Has some good Star Wars moments in that too.
that's
It's my favorite sitcom of all time. And, yeah,
right.
maybe we should do an episode on that. Just thinking out loud. Just all the
I've
Star
never
Wars
watched How I
references.
Met Your Mother, so I'll have to watch
Oh
like a
my
Star
gosh,
Wars.
you have to. Everyone watching on stream, tell Joel in the chat. Watch How I Met Your Mother. It's so good.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I think. Right.
I think we're good. I think we're good. We got to talk about this trailer now. Yes, we got an eyes on the screen. Yes, the trailer, and I'm sure you've all seen it. If you haven't, uh, see the trailer. It was exciting. Yeah, we'll get to that question in a bit. We promise. Yeah, but first off, Joel, what were your overall thoughts on the Bad Batch? First, I'll say 3-episode premiere, February 21st. And this is the final season that we knew, and yeah, definitely bringing the series to a again. When you can bring a story to a good conclusion, then that's always a skill to know when to actually bring it to an end, when to end, when to fold up, when to walk away. So yeah, looking forward to that little. I mean, not looking forward to an ending, but looking forward to an ending well. Is what I should say. So anyway, Joel, what are your thoughts on the trailer overall?
Oh, I loved it. It's beautiful. It's like, oh my god, it's like some of the best looking animation. Like they've really honed in their Clone Wars style animation.
Mm-hmm.
It's really pretty. Really good. Yeah, it looked epic, man. It's like this is it. This is the final run.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's just nice to know when a Star Wars is coming, and it's gonna be going until May. So it's like, yay, something to look forward to. Huzzah! Um, so yeah, I'll leave the big 2 points for
Yeah,
later.
we'll get there in a
But
minute.
yeah, but overall, really excited, and I've been loving Bad Batch. It's certainly a show that surprised me in a lot of ways, and I hope it nails the landing, and could be one of the best animated shows they've done so far. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I really think it will. I really loved, especially the way it built off of everything that's coming for, especially the ending of season 2.
Mhm.
This show, it's kind of underneath, it kind of sneaks in under everything else a little bit in for my consciousness, only because the live action and High Republic and
Mhm.
everything else happening. Oh yeah, Bad Batch, we got this animated show that's a continuation of my favorite series of all time. And so yeah, and in this one, it's really leaning into that. It's really leaning into the play of clones and the impact of I mean, especially of Tech dying. That's going to leave a mark, and it does.
Heck.
Of Omega and Crosshair being arrested on being held on Mount Tantus, all the implications there, continuing to show the rise of the Empire and the strengthening of the Empire. And we'll get to that in a very quick second. Uh, but also, I mean, I think still just this different movements starting to step up and push against in the role of clones as part of this burgeoning rebellion. Very early days, obviously, but really, I mean, they do it in a way, and again, this is another thing Star Wars at its best as well. They do it in a way by showing it through characters. They tell the larger historical stories through characters we've already know and connect with. So
Mhm.
through this Bad Batch, through Hunter and Omega, and then um, and even Echo and Wrecker, and of course in Rex, and even Wolf showing up here. That's, I mean, also seeding a little bit for Rebels, I think,
Mhm.
but still showing these characters we know, that what's happened to them, where do they fit in continuity with the Clone Wars, but also what's their role in these dark times. And yeah, it's going to be, it's one of those things. It doesn't get as much attention because it's animated, unfortunately, which is odd. I mean, maybe that's in my own attention span. I don't know,
Nah,
but
it's just
I think,
America. We have never respected animation in this
I
country.
mean, I'm not even in America, so I have less of an excuse. There we go. No, it's North America. Yeah, probably our North American Western bias against animation. That's probably true. But also, yeah, as I say, this is, it looks like it's going to be really impactful.
Mhm.
Probably more impactful than, say, Mandalorian season 3, which I enjoyed, but this is going to be a lot tighter. I do so I do think, yeah, they're going to tie into a little bit more about what, I mean, I wonder what we'll see in terms of rebels that we know, future rebels that we know. Is Mon Mothma going to show up here? Hera's shown up again. That's the larger historical story. I love that I mean, they have to reflect on Tech dying, or yeah, Tech.
Well, the trailers clearly show
Yeah,
that they are.
they are. Yeah, and so they've given us the character beats that we need, is what I'm getting at. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, February 21st. It's not that. It's the thing. They left it late. It's less than a month. It's interesting they left it late. I know. Hannah woke up at 7:30 Australia Eastern time to a trailer. Yeah, because I just anyway saw when she posted her thing, but yeah, it's yeah, looking forward to it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. Do you have anything further to add before we get into some of the weeds?
Nope. Let's get into them weeds.
All right. So the first detail we really want to pick out is Uncle Palpy. He has he has this very key quote. He shows, this is very much Empire Ascendant, and he has this quote. We don't know what he's talking about, but there is nothing of greater importance to secure the future. I'm not going to do the impression, so you can do the
I'll
impression.
do it. I'll do it.
Go
I'll
ahead.
do it. I can read it.
Yeah.
There is nothing of greater importance to secure the future of this empire. Whatever is needed to accomplish this goal, you will have it.
There we go. And we think maybe this has to do with something on Mount Tantus. At least I think it might. Um, yeah, it's showing the importance of whatever's happening here.
Mhm.
My mind, they're not going to do this. They're not going to go there. My mind is making a beeline to Exegol.
I don't know. I think it might. I think it will.
I mean, that's kind of the Sith Eternal. If we see something like that, but yeah, Joe, you wanted to really get into this. So what do you think of this quote and everything he's there?
No, I think this is Exegol related. I think this is like some proto Exegol stuff. I think this is Palpatine getting ready to secure the future of his empire by making sure he's alive to
Yeah.
see it. I can't really think of anything this important that Palpatine himself would be
Mhm.
willing to personally involve himself in. Because sort of like, Palpatine doesn't really like to get involved in things that much. It's like unless it's really important. Other times it's like, Darkin, you do this.
Right.
Go off, Lord Vader. Do it. I don't care. I've got to just sit in my
Yeah,
chair
that's
and
true.
relax. Party. The point Palpatine's like he doesn't like to leave the capital that much. He just sort of lets the bureaucracy kind of
Mhm.
do it. It's sort of like build me a super weapon, and then everyone like scuttles to build one, and then it's just a big bureaucratic mess. But if the Emperor himself is getting involved, it's like, oh shoot, this must be important, like to get the big guy to come down from his ivory tower and take a look. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's some implications here that are for the future of the larger story for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Again, there's a reason my mind goes to Exegol. I do think we have to see what Omega is all about. If if she is something to do with what I mean, he always constantly wants to find a new apprentice, and we know with Palpatine, the thing he cares about most isn't the Empire; it's the Sith, and his. I mean, it's his own. He think he cares about most is himself and his own eternal glory and
Himself, the Sith, then somewhere down there, the Empire.
sure, but he needs an apprentice who isn't encased in a you know in this mechanical cyborg body, cyborg suit. Maybe I mean maybe that's his plan for Echo, or Echo, not Echo, Omega. you know,
Maybe I kind of doubt that. I feel like it's more get myself a nice fancy body because I'm old and crippled.
yeah, or well, I mean, I think we know from Rise of Skywalker, you'd be willing to kind of transfer his essence to this other being. Maybe that's kind of the plan for Omega, which is even creepier and weirder, right? This is this
Right.
kid. I mean, with Ray, it was already weird.
I mean, in Dark Empire, he tried to put himself in a baby.
Yeah.
So,
So
uh,
that kind of thing comes up. But yeah, really, really just interesting
now
again to see the scope and the importance of this. So
now
go ahead.
this would be a bit of a wild card, but let's just go with my brain here. So let's
Mhm.
say maybe Doctor Hemlock does it. Maybe he does manage to create like a line of clones for the Emperor,
Yeah.
but then the Bad Batch screw it up. But only one clone survives, and that's when Palpatine's like, "I'm going to keep this one clone for myself
Hmm.
and just put it in storage for a good 30 years." And that's the clone he puts him that we see him on Exegol. But it's like when he puts himself in it, it's like, "Oh shoot, this is not working." But all the good
Yeah.
people are dead, so now I'm stuck with it.
I mean,
Ah.
I know this is a paper thing, but
Mhm.
I mean, we know he made multiple clones. We know. I
He
mean,
made one
what?
clone of himself and multiple strand casts of just Snokes and
Because who's Ray's father? What's his name?
Damon.
Yeah, Damon. He's a clone, right?
A strand cast.
He's a
So
strand
it's
cast. Okay. There's a difference. I
so
don't know what the difference is.
apparently a strand cast is when you like sounds like a strand cast is just like making a baby, but maybe with some extra parts where it's like you just a little bit of Palpatine, a little bit of Luke, a little bit of this
Okay.
woman.
Right. The hand.
Uh, but maybe a bit. I mean, I don't know. That's what it sounds like. What strand cast is to compare to just full on cloning.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Sounds like more like artificial insemination without the human part.
Yeah. Anyway, I do. I mean, I think there's something. Omega has some part to play in this. I mean, we know Grogu will probably have something. That's the thing. They are. I do think they're going to at least imply some sort of through line. We know Gideon had all his clones. That was kind of weird and odd what they did with him at the end. Speaking of Mandalorian season 3. So yeah, I mean, I think either yeah, Dark Arts cloning. And I hope they go for it. We know Clone Wars went for it with some of these weirder things. So yeah, let's see it, Bad Batch. Let's see them go for it. The weird, goofy cloning Star Wars stuff. There we go. You have any further thoughts on this bit before we get to it?
Nope. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. I'll bring up the question again. Comments. What do we think? So yeah, at the end of the trailer, we have Nika Futterman's voice. I mean, now at first I thought, oh, maybe that's interesting. My first thought was um, in not Master of Apprentice, Twilight of the Apprentice, Nico Futterman voices the Sith holocron weapon thingy, the pyramid, right?
Right.
That's also Nico Futterman. It's a very, very distinctive voice. I mean, I don't know who that is. We don't know who that is. Probably some
I think
ancient
we
Sith
do,
figure.
but I think it's somewhere in Wikipedia. I think they gave her a name.
Some ancient Sith, whatever,
Yeah.
who's ever, and that can also be changed and whatever. And Filoni apparently knows who that is. But anyway, Nico Futterman, like, what's happening? What's going on? And of course, it's Ventress with more hair and a yellow lightsaber, and kind of standing, I think, in a more heroic pose. Now it's shot, if animated, as if she's fighting the Bad Batch and talking to them. I think Omar and I think Ben and some others said, "No, wait a minute." And you might have said, "Wait a minute, no, this could be. This is probably some kind of bait and switch in terms of what they're doing. In terms of where she is, who she's fighting against, who she's talking to. Something about I had planned to kill you, or hadn't planned to kill you, but you're making it tempting, or something like that. Who we don't know who she's talking to. She has a yellow lightsaber, not a red one, so that's interesting. So one thing, I mean, the big thing, there's this book here, and then I can't do this. Ventress lives. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. Ventress lives. Maybe. I mean, so at the end of Dark Disciple, which is of course this is the spoiler alert for Dark Disciple. At the end of that, the unused scripts for Clone Wars season 8 or 9, written by Katie Lucas, Christy Golden, then turned into a beautiful novel, beautiful Ventress Quinlan Voss novel. She dies. She eats it, apparently. And that's the big question. That's the big, okay, here we go again, right? Here we go again with Bad Batch taking a paper story. He's like, nope, excuse me. We think, possibly.
Not really. I mean, you can die and then come back.
Let me get to it. So
You can.
we think really, and thankfully, StarWars.com and Brad Rao explicitly have addressed this, and that's the nice thing. I'll quote from them, from StarWars.com. We love Asajj Ventress. She's a character that we've been wanting to tell more stories about, as Brad Rao says in the series. He makes clear that her return will honor prior tales, including the book in which the character apparently perished. Apparently. We don't want to spoil anything, but want fans to know that any new storytelling with Ventress will align with the events of Star Wars Dark Disciple. Okay. How? One thing, there's a few suggestions here, and I'll turn to you in a minute, but there's a few suggestions here. One thing, she faked her death, possibly. She faked her death for Quinlan, faked her death for us, for the Jedi. That's the interesting thing. She was turning back to the light. We do know that, and I think that's getting the most consistent story beat that carries on from Dark Disciple. So we know that she may have faked her death. Again, here's Joel. I'll give you a bit of a trivia. What planet is she from?
Dathomir.
What species is she?
Night Sisters isn't a species. It's a
what group? What people thing is
Night
she?
Sister.
The Night Sister. Can Night Sisters bring people back from the dead?
All the time.
All the time. So
they do on Tuesdays.
They do on Tuesdays. We podcast on Mondays. They bring people back from the dead on Tuesdays. Chris and I podcasting on Wednesdays. So, yeah. So I mean, we saw that in Clone Wars with the guy named Maul, right? That's also possible. Of course, Mother Talzin and them, she isn't there anymore. We've seen Night Sister magic on screen in 2024 or 2023, whatever year that was. So, yeah, that's also a possibility. I mean, I think the best bet is she kind of faked her death. What I love about this, the best thing for me, honestly, is the fact that they've acknowledged it, that they've said this is in conversation. Yes, this is a screen character. This is going to get into our main topic eventually. Mm-hmm. We're getting there. It's a screen character that there were these unused scripts that said, okay, we want to tell the story. Let's make a novel. So he gets this really rich development on paper in this novel. And then here she is coming back to screen, and she apparently dies. There's a conversation. It isn't simply, we're just not simply ignoring that development, and that I think is new, frankly. And Joel, I think you'll get to how that might be kind of new. They're
Mhm.
really having a more robust conversation with the paper story that, of course, was going to be a screen story, but that might be a little bit about it. But yeah, at least they mention it, right? And that they're gonna, yeah, there's gonna be some kind of finagling or whatever. It give us a good story, give us something that feels right. And the one last thing I'll say is the reason, probably the reason why we care so much that about the events of Dark Disciple carrying forward somehow, being in conversation with Bad Batch season 3. It primarily because this book is so darn good. It's so well
Yeah,
written.
I don't know. I've heard
You haven't
mixed
read it,
things.
so I know, but I when I read it, it's so gripping, it's so moving, um, so well developed, and yeah, and so just so heartwarming in a way, and really gets at, yeah, there's some weird things with Quinlan and Dooku in there. Yeah, that part is a little murky and a little weird. But everything with
Done better in
Ventress,
the Dark Horse comics, everyone says.
everything with Ventress in that is completely on point and completely, yeah, really, really empathetic. And so yeah, you really get into her character. So that's why we want this to really continue to move forward. And again, I'm not so concerned with a Quinlan story where the implications of him kind of going undercover against Dooku, and then this is what happened. Spoiler alert: undercover against Dooku, and then actually goes so far undercover that he forgets who he is. And yeah, that was weird. That was a little murky. I get that.
Read the Dark Horse comic for the cooler version.
Yeah, sure. That's probably the case. Again, everything with Ventress is just so gripping. This love story, but also a story for finding herself and finding herself her way back to the light, while also still being herself. And so, yeah, there we go. See, Omar agrees. So there we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's those are my thoughts on Ventress. Joel, I spoke for a while, so Joel, you take it away, and then we'll get to some of these comments here.
I actually don't think it's going to be that complicated as everyone seems to be making it out to be. I think it'd be just as simple as Venture saying, "I died, and now I'm back."
Maybe I'm
Like, I mean, I don't know how. Like, you need to. I mean, outside of course, maybe Venture's, learning more, coming to herself in the light side, which was already happening in Clone Wars anyway. It's sort of
true.
like,
That's true.
I don't know how much conversation needs to be in the book outside of maybe acknowledging, "Hey, weren't you dead?" And like,
Yeah.
yes, but now I'm okay. So I don't think it has to be that complicated. And I just kind of see this as a bit of a PR move, even though, let's face it, people are going to complain anyway because that's what they do. But
right.
in terms of being a conversation, it's not like, I don't know. Does a specific detail need to happen? Do you need to have like a red light, a purple lightsaber instead of a blue one, or I don't know.
Which
It's
is a
like
yellow one, right?
I mean, well, yeah, I know that, but it's like, was that an important detail in the book? Like, she had yellow lightsabers by that
I
time.
mean, it's an important character point, right?
I mean, if she gets rid of her red one, sure.
Yeah.
But I think the general premise of just she's now more she's now more on the light side, even though she's clearly snarky, and she had a run-in with death, and now she's okay. I think those are really the only kind of big things you kind of have to worry about in terms of being in conversation with the book. I don't think there's I don't think she needs to fawn over Quinlan Voss all the time or something like that.
Yeah. Again, I agree. The richer character continuity between paper and screen is, yeah, like I said, like we both said, is her. I mean, even just again the body posture. I just noticed that she's standing the way we've seen Anakin or Obi-Wan or Ahsoka stand in these shows, and it's just there's just the feel of she's out for. I mean, that's something kind of we got it last week a little bit. Is the folks in the prequels who may have been on the more antagonist separatists, especially in the rise of the Empire, they can be rebels, right? I mean, that's the challenge, say for Rex and for
Mhm.
Gregor and for Wolf in Rebels is they have to be separatists now. Um, you know, there are all these characters that could be heroes, could be rebels. One last thought I'll say here. I thought about this. I wondered if she was a clone
Mhm.
because we're talking about Mount Tantus and all that.
Mhm.
I would find that very dissatisfying.
Yeah,
I think they would
Asajj.
be a little maybe unless they do something good with it, but I think it would be a little
It's a little sci-fi
yeah, a little soft. I think it just wouldn't be as it would be a little cheap.
against it, but it's like. But so let's read some of these comics. We got
Yeah.
some good comics here. So let's start with my. Okay, let's start
So I
with
think I
Ben.
thought with Ben from Outer Rim Transmissions. Yeah,
Good.
with Chris Abbott. Yeah, if it was like until they decide to change things to fit in other stories. Yeah, that's kind of the whole canon continuity thing. As long as it's the Star Wars story, I mean, that's kind of where you land generally, right?
Right.
Generally speaking. Although there's again, it's interesting for conversation. I'm gonna repeat this one because it's just true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too complex. Yeah, again, it is also it's animated, so things for kids.
Well,
It
I'll
can be
read some of Red's ones.
yeah, go for it.
Red says, "Yeah, when they try to work prior story into happening without telling the actual story, it gets murky. They should never have tried to adapt the Quinlan stuff. It just told the Ventress story. So I am glad to see Ventress that is doing its own
Yeah,
thing. I'm glad she's alive. I'll just say this: I'm glad she's alive. Period. Even if they did ignore the book, because I never liked the fact she was going to die. I feel like she's a character who should keep going. Um, she's like cocky, dark side. Ventress was so sure of herself, so prideful, more than evil." I also doubt they want to make Force clones sensitive clones. Yeah, I mean that's why. And then before anyone says, "What about Palpatine?" Palpatine's the OG Palpatine in a spirit in a body,
yeah.
so it's different. That's not. Although I don't know, well, Snoke is kind of a bit of an odd one, but
I
maybe that
honestly think Omega is going there.
maybe
Honestly, my gut, my kishkas again, bringing up the Yiddish.
Kishkis,
Yeah,
Kishkis.
yeah. So
I'll just say this. This is probably the most fan servicey thing ever. That part of me's like, from like a narrative perspective, I kind of don't want to see it happen. But there is this part of me that's like that fan service part of my brain that's like, I'd love it if she get to see Obi-Wan again in this time. Like, what would that?
yeah,
Like everyone's like, Maul and Obi-Wan reuniting was interesting. So it's like, what would Ventress and Obi-Wan reuniting now
agreed.
be like?
That
Because
would
they're
be
like, I always felt like, like I showed you the Dark Horse version of her death,
yeah,
which Obi-Wan, which I actually think is a little bit more interesting because I think would have been more interesting, quite frankly, because she and Obi-Wan had a bit of a thing for each other. I mean, not really a thing. I don't want to say that, but there was certainly a bit of a rivalry between them, at least early on. And she even helped him with the Darth Maul stuff early on, which I thought was going somewhere. So it would be kind of interesting to see like old, maybe after a Kenobi, post Reva, Obi-Wan, as like Ventress still kind of out there, and they just like, oh wow, you're alive, and it's like you're alive and not evil anymore, and it's like.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
like
mean, that would be a couple decades after this.
that might break some of the Obi-Wan hadn't heard his name in a long time thing even more than it already kind of is.
Well,
But
not necessarily. I mean, this is set just a few years after Revenge of the Sith, right?
true. But I'm talking about like I think it should be after Kenobi because Obi-Wan's kind of all down and depressed until Kenobi, and
Yeah,
a
but we
little
wouldn't see
late.
that in this show, though.
But
That's
no, I'm just glad Ventress is alive,
yeah.
man.
I mean, the point you mentioned in Legends, she does fake her death,
yeah.
right? So
They never dealt with her afterwards.
that'd be interesting. So I mean, here's another weird one. I don't think we're gonna do it, but Palpatine saying, what's his quote? Nothing of greater importance, future of the Empire, whatever is needed. Let's bring up this guy. I'm gonna can't fill the camera again. This guy right here, who shows up in everything, unfortunately, even though he's the main character.
Last Bad Batch scene in the series is a Bad Batch in a hallway, and you just hear, red lightsaber. That's the end of the show.
I mean, I mean, he's my favorite fiction character of all time. I hope he doesn't show up.
At least not with the Bad Batch stuck in a hallway.
Yeah, just over what for? Why?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, he does show up when Poppy really finally needs something done, right?
Right.
Finally needs something happen. So maybe.
Well, maybe for like a less fan servicey moment, maybe it's like a, Doctor Hemlock has failed, and it's like Palpatine's like tisk tisk, and then you just hear.
Yeah, maybe
Then
just for a moment for him off camera. Yeah,
Hemlock
that could
is.
be good.
I would
I
actually be
will take
interesting if
2
Hemlock is.
seconds of my favorite character of all time. There we go.
Oh, here's
Yeah,
a good question, actually.
yeah.
Ah, I mean, I would kind of hate for Ventress to fight Vader and die just to kind of come back.
Yeah.
It's like let her. I mean, here's a fun fact for all
Yeah.
you and my buddy Reds. If you're still in the chat, you might like this too, or maybe not because it's sort of like, oh man, they could have done this. Ventress actually almost appeared in Resistance. It's like that was almost gonna be that. She almost appeared
I
an old
had no idea about that. Wow.
yeah,
All right.
there was a character in Resistance whose name escapes me, but she was like a bit of a forcey character.
Mhm.
That could be Ventress, and I think that was like their plans for like if they got a season 3.
Was that
Sadly,
like the Jedi Temple?
yeah, that kind of character. I
Yeah.
forgot her name. She was in season 2, but she was like the more force
Mhm.
driven person. She wasn't like she wasn't a Jedi or Sith I think she
Yeah.
like tuned in with like that was gonna be an old Ventress. Old Ventress apparently was almost in
Yeah.
Resistance. That was
That's
like a
interesting.
idea. I know, right? It's like
What?
I know, right? They
Yeah.
almost had old Ventress in Resistance. It would have been. I think I've heard that somewhere.
So anyway, just to go back to the Obi-Wan point. I mean, that's the only reason I'd be okay with him being in this. If there's some way of picking up, it's not that they have. I mean, they had this banter,
Mhm.
and I think there's this mutual respect. That can now the Ventress is actually on the light. Maybe he's the way he said, "We thought you died. What happened?" Maybe he's the one. Maybe
Oh,
he's the one she's facing down, staring down. in
Rex
the
though.
room.
Rex would actually be really good to have Ventress interact with though, because remember in the Clone Wars movie, she tried to mind control, mind, you know,
Yeah,
and then it's sort of like now we're on the same side. That would be.
yeah, maybe. I mean, I think maybe Cody or somebody instead.
I mean, yeah, maybe.
Because I mean, there's somebody using blasters. Although Obi-Wan might be using a blaster at that point.
I
He's
don't think
not
we'll
using
see
his
Opie
lightsaber.
in the show. I feel like we would have advertised it if we
No,
did.
maybe not. I mean, they got the Ventress hit. What if it's even more? What if it's you think Ventress? Look who she's talking to.
That's true. I mean,
You know,
maybe
and she says, "I wasn't planning on killing you." Maybe it's still more banter. I don't know.
maybe.
That's it's a thought. I don't
I
know.
I hope this means that she's alive for more stuff though in
Yeah,
general, because that's a character I like. I never liked the fact she died, even in Darkest. If Darkest Side would have been an 8-episode miniseries, I still wouldn't have liked the fact she died.
mhm.
I just feel like that's a character who's like, hey, she's going to the light side, so it's nice to kind of see, hey, she's not dead. She's actually trying to improve herself. Let's get some atonement in here. But also just kind of see her, kind of live her life to see maybe even the end of the Empire, and she could just be someone who's like, I lived the life. I lived the life and I made mistakes.
They didn't advertise when they did advertise Maul,
That's true.
a Night Brother
That's
of
true.
Dathomir.
That's true.
My mind's kind of going in a weird direction now. We're going to Dathomir and Ahsoka season 2. I don't know. Maybe Dathomir getting another time in the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dathomir is back.
Quinlan. I mean, that's okay. There's an interesting thought with the path.
That's right.
That's one thing to say is we know Quinlan's involved in the path. Maybe she does, but and if there is if they do pick up that connection, I mean, he's more free. They're more free to have this relationship if they want. There's no order anymore. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's she's being true to herself, and that's always somewhat of a risk with the romantic connection. With Ahsoka, for example, the reason they don't is because the risk of her. I mean, this is. I mean, the risk of our kind of misogynist viewpoint of a woman can only be a love interest.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that happens. I'm not saying that a woman who has a love interest is automatically going to become a love interest. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that it's hard and risky. I mean, Jane Corbett as a woman writing this, she probably is going to do a better job. Katie Lucas and Christy Golden. That's the thing. Katie Lucas and Christy Golden both did a fantastic job with that too. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool to see Ventress maybe with the past, just to kind of. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a plot point that hasn't come up in a while. But we'll have plenty of time to discuss
Yeah.
Bad Batch in the future. I'm excited. I can't wait to see season 3. I can't wait to see the Mount Tantus shenanigans.
Yes.
All that good stuff.
And I'm certain, I know across the Underworld network, I know Hannah's already talked about it. I'm certain Thursday night they're going to talk about it on the flagship right here. Chris and I will probably mention it a little bit on Wednesday, maybe. So yeah, definitely keep locked here on the Underworld channel, Underworld network for more, because yeah, it's the big thing. It's the big thing, big screen thing that we're talking about. Some big paper things. If we can move on,
Yes.
a little bit of paper things. So Chris and I talked about Charles' updates in his newsletter. If you haven't signed up for Charles Soule's newsletter, go to his website, sign up for that. Lots of great. I mean, he and so many others, Kevin Scott, E.K. Johnson, they share way more in these newsletters than they do on social media, because it just, they know it's a self-selecting group of fans who really do want to engage constructively with what they have, what they're doing, what they're putting out. So I do recommend that. So Chris and I went into a bunch of that stuff that was updated in the newsletter. So because it's mostly comics. So, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. I do want to mention there was a big High Republic book bit chunk that he talks about. I'll just say that he's ankle deep in Trials of the Jedi. He said, this is just quoting here from his newsletter. He says it's pretty well outlined. This is the capstone, the final, probably the final story, definitely the final novel in High Republic. Phase 3, the High Republic Initiative. He does mention some comics that might be set afterwards. We'll see. But he says Trials of the Jedi is pretty well outlined. I built it to feel like a cyclone. You as a reader will fall into the top, get spun around, then get closer and closer to the bottom, with everything getting faster and faster, more intense, and then we'll see. And it says also that it's designed to work for people who haven't read anything since Light of the Jedi, which is an interesting possibility, intriguing possibility there. That people could catch up just like that. But also for people like weirdos like me who've read every single High Republic tale they've put out. So he says he'll be working on this over the rest of the winter and the spring. So yeah, that's that bit of news. He does say in this Tabana and the Tank bit, Chris and I went into that. Did we think Return of the Jedi? When's Return of the Jedi come? This is in the comics leading up to Return of the Jedi. How long left? How long left? Oh, ye of little faith, there's still Tabana and the Tank left. And that there's going to be more stories, at least the number 50, ongoing number 50. And then he says something special about when they hit issue number 50. And then he says, but in April, I know he's going to work on Light of the Trials of the Jedi. That's the book he's writing. He's also going to be working on a new comic in April. Something he says that he's wanted to do for a while. We've wanted to do for a while. Again, Chris and I speculated on what that might be. Joel, what are your thoughts on the Tabana and the Tank to Return of the Jedi? And then what do you think this new comic in April is going to be?
Well, it doesn't seem like Return of the Jedi is going to be ending in 2024. That's for certain. That's my feel on that. Yeah. So we might have to go to 2025. You think it's going
to go until like 2025 in the comics?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
That's the vibe I get from that. But as for the special thing, everyone sort of thought, is it that Palpatine comic he really wants to do? Could it be a Momin thing? Want to expand on Momin? Heck, maybe he really wants to do that Lobot story that he's wanted to do. I mean, I don't want to necessarily put my hopes into one thing, because you never know what's going to happen. He might be Kira. Could be more Kira stuff. What's she up to? He might really love that character. So I know you think it's the Palpatine thing.
I did, and I'll get to that in a second.
Okay, I mean it's possible, but I don't know. I really don't want to nail it down, because I might be wrong.
I was confident it was the Palpatine thing. until this afternoon, and then
Oh,
well
really?
until just now thinking about it.
Mhm.
If Palpatine has a more substantive role in the Bad Batch, that could mean either they don't want him to do anything, or it could mean this is going to be a little bit of an unofficial tie-in to the Bad Batch. Is also possible, or it could be set in a completely different era, and I have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's also possible. Um, yeah, I think if anything, I don't know. I mean, Kira, he's written a lot about Kira. If anything, Kira uh after Hidden Empire, after Return of the Jedi, and all that, maybe something with Kira and Maul is a possibility. But I think he seems to really be drawn to Lobot. He seems to really want to tell stories about Lando and Lobot more. That 2015 comic that he did, I think his first Star Wars comic, it was really well done. And that also involved Nolan, of course, and so that is a possibility. We'll see. We'll find out eventually. We might not find out till San Diego. We might not find out till New York Comic Con.
Well, maybe I'll be lucky and I'll be able to get a front row panel for that since I'm hopefully going to be
Yeah, there
there.
we go. So yeah, we'll find out for sure. But just very curious. I mean, you're kind of your gut saying Lobot.
Honestly, yes, a little bit. It's like he really likes Lando.
Yeah.
He really likes Lando, and that was his first one. So it's
Yeah.
like he's been telling this Lando Lobot story for a long time.
Yeah, that's true. And he just finished, as part of the update, he said he had just finished writing ongoing number 47, which is the end of the Lando trial arc, which is going to be pretty great. I'm really excited for it. The first issue of that hasn't come out yet, but that's issue 44 is when it starts, and so we're on it. We're waiting for issue number 43 in the next few weeks. That comes out, and I forget which week it comes out, but yeah, then the Lando trial, which involves Lobot, by the way.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so well, yeah, I'm sure we'll find out, but it's just tease. Like, what is it already? So hopefully, yeah, we got lots of Star Wars stories before then to tie us over. I mean, we got Escape from Valhalla coming out January 30th, High Republic, and then of course every week got comics coming out. So yeah, check out Tractor Beam. We'll also talk about different news and whatnot, any kind of comics news that comes up. If it comes up after Monday, we'll talk about it. I mean, even then, if it comes out on Monday, Chris and I will still talk about it because we want to talk about comics.
Nice.
But yeah, there we go. That's all the front matter, all the different things. We're an hour in.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joel.
Right. Okay.
We got a topic to talk about. We've already started talking about it, but
I know. So character continuity. So Star Wars, big franchise. Books, comics, movies, games, novels. I said books. VR, trading cards. And it has characters in it, and sometimes those characters love to transfer in and out of the various mediums where they start. So it's how do you keep it all together? How do you keep it all straight, but also make sure to remember that at the end of the day, this is all fiction. At the end of the day, and so I guess let's start with my first point. It's one of those topics, folks, that's going to be very kind of all over the place. I guess the question is: are characters are nebulous, or are they avatars of what the writer wants to say? And what I mean by that is, this is where a lot of the not my Luke Skywalker for Last Jedi people come along. Is Luke Skywalker a nebulous character that what he did in Last Jedi was not right because he would never do such things, or is he at the day a fictional character that Rian Johnson wanted to make a point with part of the deeper themes that Last Jedi covers about fate, lots of needing your heroes, etc. So what Ryan did was take Luke Skywalker in a specific direction, because he had a very specific point he wanted to tell in his story. Or it could be also both. I think it's a bit of both. Honestly, I think Luke Skywalker would do something like this as well. But that is sort of the question of like, what is a character is nebulous. Like, you do not change for the life of you, or what is also like I have a specific story I want to tell using this character.
Mhm.
So let's kind of start there, and I'll let you talk. Yeah,
I'm looking at the definition word nebulous.
I mean, I use that where it's sort of like the character is a pre-built thing separated from the writer.
Yeah,
Like,
interesting.
Darth Vader. You write Darth Vader. You must write Darth Vader always a specific way because he's like this, or
Yeah, I'm not sure the word nebulous. It's my editor brain going. I'd rather pick like predefined, prescribed. I guess, but that's kind of what you're getting at.
yeah.
Is there just this is what Luke Skywalker is? Um,
Tell a Luke Skywalker story. Well, what does that mean?
and I think a good storyteller it's neither, or maybe it's both. Um,
It's all
there
of
are
the
things that
things.
are consistent in
Hmm.
who the character is,
Hmm.
but if he's a real character, or if he's realistic, or he or she or they are realistic, then they're going to grow and move in certain directions.
Hmm.
The Luke example is really interesting because Ryan was, yes, looking at what we think Luke is,
Hmm.
and playing with that for sure. But he had already been given this prompt by J.J. Abrams to say he's on his own on Octo, being all grumpy, looking back. We have that one moment, that one shot, and go. What do you do with that? That's a prompt, right?
Right.
What do you do with that moment? Why is he there? And so, Ryan starts asking, yeah, again, these questions. Why is he there? Why is he so out, so hard to find out in the middle of nowhere in these robes? What's he up to?
Hmm.
What is he doing? What does he care about or not care about? Why isn't he with his sister helping the resistance, right? Why isn't he taking this legend
Hmm.
that he should have,
Hmm.
um, that even more Santeca seems to be care so much about building up and getting back to? Why isn't he a part of that already? And so Ryan really dug deep and thought about those questions and said, okay, this can this connect? This is a really meaningful thing I want to say. Here's Luke. Here's Luke doing such a great job of, or not doing such a great job. Luke's position at the end of The Force Awakens, saying this is fits really well with what I want to say. We have Rey. I mean, I think that the bigger change in the sequel trilogy is with Rey, right? On one hand, I mean, that's still an evolution, though. It's still a growth. It's still, but that's the thing with evolution. You go from, you start with, um, the thing about it is that it's change, but it's elastic change. It's reform. I don't know. This is kind of it's church language. It's reform rather than rupture or strict continuity. It's development that builds on what comes before, and that's, I mean, that's a big theme in the Last Jedi as well, right?
Hmm.
That it's not about killing what you hate, but saving what you love and moving it on into the future. So yeah, the thing with Luke, again, it's a big example. I mean, I mentioned last week, the content is the audience, and you know
Hmm.
I think a fixed position character that, especially Luke, again, that is something we as fans have in our minds. This is what he is. I mean, the whole not my Luke thing. I mean, we could berate that so much. It forgets the whole I'm a Jedi like my father before me. What does he do? He chucks his lightsaber, right?
Hmm.
That's already there in his story, in his continuity. It is, clearly there's something that happened with Kylo Ren. This is another thing that Ryan must have thought through. Something that happened with Kylo Ren. Something that happened with, I mean, JJ in The Force Awakens have this vision of his school burning down, right?
Right.
All these things must have happened that are a radical shift and a radical departure from Luke's character, and that's the thing is Ignite the Green. That's the irony.
Mhm.
Is in the Last Jedi, Ignite the Green is a departure from Luke's character. It is he was being untrue to himself, and that's what shocks him into into what he does, being a grumpy old man. It's very realistic. It's very natural in the way our lives work, human lives work when we experience things. So, if what Ryan wanted to say was this is real life, then yeah, he said it. And that's the thing. It is, yeah. At the end of the day, yeah, it is. He is in control of what direction a character goes in. Control what does. It's not always built in, and the best stories can surprise you with what a character ends up doing, but also not necessarily. That's the thing. Another thing I think about Star Wars is just because you can predict something, like Ahsoka. I could tell you Ahsoka's going to confront her past with Vader, Anakin, and come out more cheerful and wiser through it.
She might not. I mean, if someone didn't want to do that, they're like, no, she actually become grumpier.
Yeah, and then they would have had. I would have had to buy it. The thing is, I was already. I did. My point is because even just because I could predict something doesn't mean it's bad either.
Oh no.
And,
I mean, I think the best storyteller, the best author can kind of like take a character and push them like to the brink of like almost breaking them.
yeah,
Not mentally, but like almost like this isn't the character anymore. Like it's just right over the edge.
mhm.
But it's like if they can do it, like if they can just do it before like stopping. Like I think those are like the best takes, and that's sort of like what I see Last Jedi. It's like you push Luke right up into the edge of almost like, oh my god, what are you doing? And then it's like, but no, it's so good. Um, and I think
Another example. I just want to say,
yeah.
Ventress, the Ventress we knew. This is kind of the point. The Ventress we knew from Clone Wars. Yeah, she's starting to change. Her
Mhm,
when she's helping Ahsoka on the run.
mhm,
She's starting. Even everything with the bounty hunters and everything there, and how I think what she stops those bounty hunters and I guess the Boba Fett crew and that's her, right? I'm not going
right.
nuts. Um,
Yeah.
starts making choices for the sake of others, but the real switch, the real change, does happen in the story, the pages of a Dark Disciple, and yet we don't see that on screen. But again, like we were saying, we are gonna hopefully see the results of it. Ultimately, is that the same Ventress? Is that the same person who's changed? I mean, is it even good storytelling for there to be a main? You can't have a main character that is just fixed in place,
Right.
right? Comics kind of do this a little bit. They say this is what this character is. Certainly, the big crossover events. This is what Captain America is. Steve Rogers doing his thing, and if a crossover in a big event he's a side character, but then you got Ta-Nehisi Coates over here writing this other story about how he isn't the hero. He has to depend on this group of women to help. That's a great comics run, by the way. Is the Ta-Nehisi Coates Captain America? Yeah, yeah, it could be at the end of the day, yes, everything is an avatar of what the writer wants to say,
Mhm,
but there's a reason in a franchise, in a franchise with continuity, with multiple media. There's a reason why an author or creative picks up these characters and that characters and lets others go. The reason why Ryan Johnson introduces Rose, there's a reason JJ drops her. Yeah, all those
well,
other
not.
things. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
not necessarily a
Well,
good reason, but there's a reason.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of. I mean, that's one of the sequel trilogies. I think if there is I mean, I don't. Well, that is sort of a critique of the sequel trilogies is doing a trilogy, but you kind of have three different people. They're all going to kind of focus on different things,
Yeah.
for good and for bad.
I'd say it's the
I'm.
challenge. It's the challenge of this. Right.
Although granted, even George dropped some of his characters all around, so it's not like the prequels themselves
Yeah.
have a consistent cast. Outside of I guess Luke Han, I guess Luke Han, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme, and I guess Palpatine.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's a whole other story. But I mean, yeah, but it is interesting, and I guess it kind of depends on like the creative hands, right? Like we debated whether or not, should Palpatine have more of a nuanced, tragic backstory, or should he just be the Antichrist sociopath? And I'm like, I mean, I didn't like George Lucas's idea of like he fell in love with somebody, then she broke her heart, because I think that's like plays into some very bad stereotypes and tropes. Um, but like that's another thing. Like, we could debate whether or not Palpatine, that didn't start off as a complete sociopath, even aligns with the character as we know him in both the prequels and Return of the Jedi. Because it's sort of
Mhm.
like, it's like, if you like gave him like he has like he misses his mom or something like this. Like, really, Palpatine doesn't seem to like even hold a shred
Yeah.
of humanity in him, let
Whereas
alone.
Vader missing his mom,
Yeah, that makes sense.
you
That
know.
that I mean that's the difference between like Vader and like Palpatine, where it's like, to me the additions to Vader's backstory, yeah, I can see it. Like, I can
Yeah.
buy it in terms of like a grander story, but it's like, really, Palpatine actually had friends and like cared about people. I'm like, I know people can follow the dark side, but this is kind of, it doesn't really add up in my brain. And
Yeah.
maybe there is somebody out there who could make that work. I don't know you. You have to be like a really
It's his
good.
name, Charles Soule.
And I don't even think Charles Soule could do it. Um,
He wouldn't want to. I
I
think
don't think he would
he
want to either.
understands. I don't think that's the I don't think that's the Palpatine story.
Right. I mean, but I don't. But maybe that's a sign of like, maybe no one wants to, because all the creatives will just say, you know what? No, that's not the character. There is a bit of a sometimes um a consensus
Mhm.
around what he can and can't do. Now, obviously, I guess that's not always a good sign or bad sign. There are plenty. I'm sure there are still plenty of artists this day who like go like, what George did in the prequel was not the right decision. Plenty of artists this day probably would say that. So I'm not
Yeah.
saying consensus means that's the right thing to do, but I am saying sometimes if there's a consensus on something,
Yeah.
there's a reason for that.
I'll say, Palpatine is an odd example because he isn't as much a character as he is a function
That's true.
in the
That too.
story. Whereas Vader Anakin is a
Mhm.
character and is the
That
main character, right? At least
right. I mean,
in the through line. And I mean, Vader in A New Hope is a function.
oh,
And it's
totally.
just, we don't see Palpatine at all until the hologram in Empire, right? We
Hmm.
we don't see, so until then he's just this airy fairy, the Emperor's dissolved the Senate,
Right.
whatever. But Vader's the real villain. But even then, like it was like I saw on Friday night, presence I haven't felt since, and we can talk about different things. Uh,
Well,
you
that
know,
was the interesting thing
yeah,
about Vader in A New Hope. Well, first off,
mhm.
I actually could argue that Vader's not the real villain. It's Tarkin who's the actual mastermind of the New Hope.
Sure, you can argue
Um,
that for sure. Yeah.
but I do think even back in A New Hope, there were always, and this is where I feel like in some ways Vader was the breakout character of Star Wars. If you kind of go back to that 1977,
Mhm.
where yeah, he's this guy in black, and it's like you give him a little bit of backstory, a little bit of backstory, a little bit of like, oh, we got a history with these people, and
Yeah.
everyone's coming out like, oh, intriguing, intriguing, even though Lucas himself was like, I don't even really know much about this Vader guy. And then obviously you actually look at Empire Strikes Back. um oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But you look at Empire Strikes Back, and that's kind of Jordan's, in a weird way, reacting to his audience and
Mm.
what people took out of that, because Vader is the villain of Empire Strikes Back. He is the
Yeah.
antagonist. He is he's the one who is antagonizing our heroes, Luke, Han, and Leia. He is not. They play him up a little bit. It's like he served the Emperor, but for the most part, Vader's doing everything himself. He is
Mm.
the dude in charge. He's got the big Star Destroyer. He's commanding the forces. He's hunting Luke down. He's hunting his friends. And then obviously with the big crescendo of "I am your father," that was George like going, "Oh, okay, this Vader guy is more than just the knight in black with a little bit of backstory. Like, no, he's a big deal, and he will be
Mhm.
the biggest deal because obviously he is Luke's dad." So
Right.
you're right. That really made Vader a character, even beyond the little scraps we get of A New Hope.
Mhm. I mean,
But
that's the thing. I mean, that's the example you talk about, pushing a character to its limits, right? Ryan
mhm,
Johnson pushing Ray to her limits, saying
mhm,
the thing she fears the most,
mhm,
that she is Ray from nobody, and how she has to face that and overcome that.
mhm,
That pushes her to her limit. and possibly pushes her to darkness, right?
Hmm.
Pushes her into that cave. With Luke, of course, it's oh,
Hmm.
I'm the son of darkness. I'm the
Right.
son of Darth Vader. That again pushes him beyond, past possibly heroism, and how in Return of the Jedi, George plays up this whole thing of he's wearing black. Is he gonna? He's choking the Gamorreans. Is he gonna actually turn to the dark side? Is he gonna pick up the saber and strike Palpatine down and take his place or whatever, take Vader's place or who knows what,
Right.
um, whatever it is. Uh, but then no, and that's the thing about. I mean, maybe there's being true to this is kind of what we're getting at with continuity, right?
Right.
Character continuity. It's
Mhm.
being true to what has come before,
Right.
and that can change and develop and grow. It's being true to something doesn't mean being absolutely fixed and bound by it, right?
Right. I
Like
mean,
again, that's not real
mhm,
life. All of our experiences, we can't help but be true to them because we just make
mhm,
choices in the moment. We can do things that are out of character,
mhm,
uh, maybe, but that's because we're maybe trying a new thing, and that's the thing. Even about Rupture,
mhm.
Luke igniting the green, something has spooked him so much, right? It's still part of a story, is what I'm getting at here, and
Well,
you know,
to connect it to real life, real life is not up in progress. There's
no
dips and values and setbacks, and what's when you what's I'm losing a
ebbs and
brain.
flows and
Ebbs and flows. You fall back on your bad habits
setbacks.
sometimes, but at the same time, unless you have like a really good reason for it, you're not gonna have Empire Strikes Back Palpatine, be like, oh, it's just strong with it, and then like Return of the Jedi Palpatine be all like, I love kittens and babies. I mean it's extreme. I'm aware of that,
Unless
but
it's robot chicken.
yeah, yeah, it's Robot Chicken Palpatine. But you're not gonna have Robot Chicken Palpatine show up in your third film.
No.
But obviously that's an extreme example, and obviously
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
if Ventress is evil again in Bad Batch and had a relapse, there's that word relapse.
Yeah.
Relapses happen in real life, but
Sure.
you have to make the relapse believable. It's just not gonna be, oh, I'm evil now because I'm just evil. It has to be like there's a reason why she relapsed. Um,
Yeah.
and
Which I
kind of
don't
like
think she will, but
no, no,
yeah.
I don't think so either. But I think that's what why Last Jedi were for me because I mean Luke didn't become evil, but he had a bit of a relapse in life, and they gave a good reason
That's
for it.
it. That's interesting, right? I mean,
Hmm.
again, seeing New Hope,
Hmm.
how he's this annoying sniveling. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go to Anchorhead and get some power converters. The whole another year, all that just wanting to
yeah.
go, wanting to go, wanting to go.
Hmm.
Then we see him at the end of Force Awakens. He's stuck. He's staying put,
Right.
out in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, or maybe here's another weird extreme example of it'd be like if Force Ghost Anakin was like, nope, being Darth Vader was great. Palpatine was number one. Like that in Ahsoka, that would be
Right.
like that wouldn't make sense.
Mhm.
That's sort of the character continuity that
Yeah.
I think is more important, unless you had like a really good reason why he feels that way. But
Mhm.
that's just sort of. But I actually wanted to get to another point,
Yeah.
and that is even though we talk about how much of a character continuity and all that, I do think who writes a character can have is always going to feel a little different, right? Like
Mhm.
let's like here's another mind game for you. If Gillen, Pack, and Soul all got a Vader comic set in between Empire and A New Hope, it's
Mhm.
not even like different eras. It's just like the same era. If you read it, yes, there'll be similarities because it's Vader, but at the same time, I think Gillen, Soul, and Pack, there's always gonna be that little thing of like they write him differently. Every
Mhm.
one of them writes him just a wee bit differently. I couldn't tell you how because I can't really think of it at the top of my head. But I think if you were like to
Yeah.
really like analyze it with a fine tooth comb, you can see like, oh, Soul writes Vader a little bit more like this. Gillen writes Vader, he leans a little bit more on this side of things, and then Pack leans a little bit more on this side of things. Like they all would have a different angle to it. It's not going to be the same.
I mean, the point there, I'd say, is more they pick up certain things in a certain time frame because that's where Vader's at. But
But if they all
You
did
know,
the same time frame, though, what
so
if they all?
Kieran Gillen, yeah, it's true, right? Kieran Gillen could have
Mhm.
brought in Sabe. There, the Star Wars annual, I think
Mhm.
from the Gillen run does go to Geonosis and does deal with that first annual there. One of the first, another early instance of a prequel flashback in an original trilogy era comic. That annual
Mhm.
goes back and deals with flashes back to, I think, those Clone Wars, the Clone Wars episodes where Anakin and Obi-Wan are down in the
Right.
caves discovering the mother there.
Mhm.
Then Vader comes back, but Greg Pak could have done the whole Sabe thing. He would have really, I mean, he could have used that to push the "I'm your father" thing, but instead, uh, Kieran Gillen uses Luke's identity to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that will be the difference. And
Well,
that's a good way of comparison. Just what they do, how they get the character. I mean, that's the thing with these comics.
mhm.
That's the thing we keep wondering with Return of the Jedi is it's all about getting ultimately about getting these characters to where they are in the films. But again, how they do that, the route they go on. Yeah, what Greg Pak maybe is more interested in versus Greg Pak, he was more interested in maybe linking it up with E.K. Johnston's Padme novels
Right.
to some extent. Whereas Kieran Gillen, I mean, they hadn't been fully written yet when Gillen was doing his run. He's more interested in uh, in introducing the whole prequel flashback crossover thing. So there's that. Whereas of course Charles Soule's writing in a different time. Yeah, maybe Charles Soule
Well,
would have
if
used
Soul
more of the
had,
visions and flashbacks, even
well,
in
yeah.
that time period. So yeah, it is a good point. It's an interesting another. You got two interesting thought experiments here, Joel. You got
Well,
me
I'll give
going
you a
twice.
third one because
There we
this is
go.
even more of an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah,
The big blue guy, no, not Marcion Rowe,
right.
like a Thrawn. I mean, obviously we can say, oh, screen TV, but I don't even think it's that
Mhm.
because obviously you have the Thrawn, the first, not the. See, this is what happens when you have too many Thrawn trilogies. You get confused. The first
Yeah.
canon Thrawn trilogy
Yes.
set during the Rebel period,
Mhm.
and then the Rebel show itself. And there is very much night and day in a lot of places. Like,
Yeah.
you talk about how in the book Thrawn, gets he leads his forces with respect. I watched Rebels. I don't think Thrawn respects anybody's forces. I think he hates them. It's like he just has like, you people are all idiots. I'm the only smart one
Well,
here.
I mean, hate's such a strong word. He's impatient.
Well, you can clearly tell he doesn't respect his forces in Rebels. And then of
I
course
mean,
there's that one
if
time.
they were respectable. No, I'm just kidding.
And then, then
I
he
get it.
blows up that one worker guy because he knows
Yeah,
uh, and then and then I'm sorry, my mouth right now.
that's okay. I mean, he's
And
clearly more villainous, right? And
and
so,
he just tortures Hera just so
mhm,
there's like a glee to it almost. Like he's
mhm.
not even like asking questions, just like he just watches Hera get tortured. It's like, oh, I got your Calicori. Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you. And then just walks off. Um,
Mhm.
and, it's like that's set during the first canon Thrawn trilogy, which is very different. And Thrawn doesn't seem that cruel in those books, from what I remember. And maybe maybe just a little more maybe stoic, but not like just actively cruel or angry. And it's like
Mhm.
doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would like at least Tim Zahn thinks, oh, that Thrawn's not for torture, or like the kind of the big kind of tell I always say is um the first scene with Thrawn, Agent Callus go, "Hey, Thrawn, you had a battle recently. There was like a high civilian count." While
Mhm.
the book retcons that like, "Oh no, that was Price's fault. Thrawn doesn't like civilian casualties." But
Yeah,
I think if you look at artistic intent for a second, I think Filoni was like, "No, this guy's brutal. He just wiped out an entire planet. That
yeah.
Thrawn doesn't mess around."
I'll
So
say the
that's
biggest example. Sorry, I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
So, that to me is an example of like two very different writers, or I guess in Filoni's case, writing teams.
Yeah,
He's not always writing it; he's got a team
sure.
behind him, taking a character and very different.
Yeah, Thrawn is the biggest example of. Um, well, here's the thing: a fixed character, two different fixed characters because they're avatars of what the story that they're telling, right?
Mhm.
Um, and and that's we've brought that up as an interesting potential example of paper to screen continuity. It's probably the biggest example of discontinuity, I've got to say. Not so much, the facts, whatever, the Canon, whatever. Um, they're two different characters. I'm sorry. It's hard to square that circle. And I'll be really interesting, given everything we've seen this Wednesday, what Jody Hauser does. And what Jody Hauser does with, and also the artist, I forget who the artist is. And that might
I
actually
think
be,
Tim's co-writing with her, so also
yeah. So it'll be closer to the story, sure.
right.
In Thrawn Alliances. But I mean, the thing about that novel, um, it has Vader in it, and Vader at a time where he's unequivocally evil. Although, interestingly enough, we're kind of cheering for him to figure out what this cortosis mind thing is happening.
Well,
Because we also have Anakin and Padme in this novel, and going to Batu, which is a place we love, and so all these experiences there. I think, yeah. Again, I'll be curious. One potential nuance is another visual appearance, and that's this interesting thing. I mean, that's the thing I did find really wonderful about Jody Hauser's adaptation of the Thrawn novel. Again, I forget who the artist is. I'll definitely mention the artist on Wednesday. Um, that was they make it feel a bit more connected. Just you can see the blue. But yeah, it is tricky. I mean, that again is the closest we get to just simply being an avatar of what the author wants to say. Um,
I mean, Tim
I mean,
Zahn
again,
has a bit of
different.
a habit of kind of making Vader seem dumb because Thrawn's smart.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like we were saying, with all the Imperials around him, everyone around Thrawn is dumb compared to Thrawn.
Oh, sure.
But
Um,
yeah, maybe I'll have to do more thinking about. Okay, where is the connectivity? Where is the connection? I mean, every story, like none of these stories are pure. Uh, like it's not scientific journalism. Even journalism is written from a perspective, even though
right.
they do as best they can to not.
Mhm.
Fiction, even more so, right? Um, the actual, I mean, yes, medium is the message, and that's definitely a big influence as well.
Mhm.
You have time to go into Thrawn's head in a novel, and that is more sympathetic already. Um,
I
the
guess for me,
the perspective, like we were saying, everything's written. I mean, say from the Ascendancy trilogy, everything is written sort of from Thalius or Arlani's perspective, looking at Thrawn, um, in a more favorable light. So maybe the continuity. It's a bit of a cheat potentially. Is that these novels are written from Thrawn's perspective, Vanto's perspective, or Anakin Vader's perspective, whereas Rebels is from Ezra and Hera's perspective, right? And
it's
Ahsoka is from Ezra and Hera's and Ahsoka's perspective too. So maybe
well,
there it is. I think that maybe the answer to our question is maybe that's it's I don't know how satisfying that is, but
I for me it doesn't work
yeah,
because I'm beyond. Yeah, even though the Thrawn novels are from his perspective, there are just actions even from that perspective that are like just so night and day. Like I can't
yeah,
imagine Thrawn ever having a friend in the Rebels version. And
mm.
um, doesn't Thrawn have like a dead sister in the Ascent? I mean, you read those books, I didn't. So like, doesn't Thrawn have like a dead sibling at the beginning of the Ascendancy novels from his younger youth? I forget.
I know. Well, I know he's not originally a myth, and he's taken from myth to the myth. Like he's taken in by the myth family. Mitth, not Myth. uh, See
Well,
that?
I was reading of an essay about this very topic.
Yeah,
And talking about how like Thrawn had like a sibling, and yet he pretty much just outright taunts Hera like, "Haha, your brother died." Like
yeah,
I'm just so it's like you know that just seems like cruelty for cruelty's sake. It's like there
yeah,
are just certain actions that just like seem just so left right. So yeah, I mean I'm gonna be honest. I say like yeah, the book character and the Filoni version are two
yeah.
different characters at this point.
I mean,
Uh,
unless like we haven't gotten any sort of explanation of this thing was so horrific that he tried to, I could see someone, uh, I mean, well, like Anakin, carrying his dead
I
mother, saying this thing
Anakin,
is
at least
so
I
horrific.
buy the fall a little bit more.
Well, let me get my point is, I can see if they made more of Thrawn's origins, if they made more of his struggle, if Zahn had made more of his struggle and why he becomes more hardened like over time. Yeah, I mean, I could see that's a good point. I could see in any of those 6 Thrawn novels, I could see him at least be a little more understanding to Hera and not use that as a weapon, a psychological weapon.
Like,
So yeah,
uh,
it's hard.
right. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the essay thing. But I mean, it's funny you actually bring up Anakin again.
Yeah.
Go back to him. You know, for a long time there was always a bit of a hardness to kind of seeing Hayden Christensen under the mask of Vader when the prequels came out. There was always a bit of a disconnect between
Mm,
you know, kind of the Anakin we see in the
yeah.
prequels, and then kind of Vader in the original trilogy, like cold, stoic, very command of himself. It's honestly not until Kenobi where it's like oh, there we go, now I see it. Like, yeah, that's Hayden under there. That's the
Mhm.
kind of the erratic, like darn you, Obi-Wan, I hate you, holding me back. Like I can just see like under the mask, like just the anger bubbling up. It's like it's the old student coming back because he's mad at his master. Um, that to me is like really was the connective tissue between those two versions. And the ending of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Where I finally like, oh yeah, that's Anakin from the prequels under that mask. Obviously, there's a more interesting reason for that was because they didn't cast Hayden yet in the 1977. How dare they? How
Sure.
dare
Was
they?
he even born yet? He might have been born yet, but I
I
mean,
know.
well, there again, I still think they did a better job of. Well, I mean,
Oh yeah,
George himself did a better
100%.
job of saying that the Vader suit, the Vader armor,
Mhm,
is all that rage being bound together and clasped together.
mhm,
Um, that we do end up seeing even in the original trilogy,
mhm.
the very wordy, uh, you know, tear the ship apart. I want her alive, kind of,
Right.
Um, uh, it's it's too late for me, son. And Anakin
Mhm,
was weak. I killed him. I mean, that was
mhm.
that's also in Twilight of the Apprentice. Oh no, yeah, Twilight of the
Yeah, the
Apprentice.
Twilight Princess.
Um, yeah, but I mean, I guess I can see where people would see the disconnect. Maybe they've done just so much work, and even Charles Soule has done so much work, and Kieran Gillen has done so much work.
Kenobi.
And Kenobi, yeah, Deborah Chow did so much work. Um, yeah, and then I mean, even Greg Pak
Mhm.
recently, but also probably in Legends too, has done a lot to
A
really.
little, oh, maybe a little bit.
Maybe not as much. Okay, fair
Dark,
enough.
though, yeah, I think Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader is a pretty good one.
Yeah,
I
but
could
yeah, I mean,
take.
it's definitely Kieran Gillen and Charles Soule recently.
Mhm.
I mean that's it, and this gets at our thing we've talked about so much is, and this is the specific example I bring up, is the way a paper story can actually affect the way we watch a film, from 1983, right?
Actually, if Kenobi did more than the comics,
Yeah,
even
or a streaming series, whatever, right? For you, it did, right? I mean, and I will say, yeah, the Charles Soule series has done a lot for me. But yeah, the point being the time they took when the fan appetite is there and is open to engaging this aspect of the story. Yeah, I can develop, and that, I mean, that's the thing about a character, and this getting back to kind of the idea of our main topic here.
right.
You know, um, that's the thing with these films. There's these time jumps, right?
Hmm.
And especially the 20-year time jump, but also the 4.5-year time jump, the half-year time jump.
Right.
You know, the characters are different. Vader between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope is very, very different, right?
Yeah.
And Charles did this perfect job of saying, okay, how do we get there?
Mhm.
Right? How do we get to we understand each other completely now.
Right.
I mean, that's also the Kieran Gillen run, but uh, yeah, there's that. The development can happen in these other stories, and that's the thing.
Right.
That you can have substantive character development in a paper story. It's just that the target is predisposed and it's predetermined, and it's functioning as backstory to the film, even though it's also main story in the comic book that you're reading or novel that you're reading in the moment. I mean, there's also
Mhm.
got to throw in Paul Kemp's was the Sith Lord's book. I forget what it's called. It's an early canon book. I mean, the Champs and Dula book.
Oh, Dark Lords.
Yeah, that one.
That's canon.
Yeah, I know. But
Okay. Um.
yeah,
No. I agree. I mean, I think, like you said, Thrawn is kind of the oddball out because Tim Zahn's
yeah.
kind of not much of a team player.
Whereas
He kind of just does his own thing.
and
Um.
Anakin Vader is the odd one in, right? Is the greatest.
Yeah. I mean, he's very much the one. But now that we're trying to talk about that, I guess we can kind of ask ourselves, what determines a character's portrayal?
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, I think. Now, obviously, we can talk about High Republic later, because I think that's going to be interesting if that ever happens. But
Yeah.
I do think ultimately is the films are kind of the foundation, and everything kind of
Sure.
like a river downward stream.
Yeah.
From there, that's sort of how I view kind of a lot of canon these days. I actually wrote an article about that where it's like canon is like a river. You have
Mhm.
some things that go downstream and then some things that go upstream.
Yeah. I guess
It's
what
like,
I'm saying though is it's possible for character development to go upstream, even if
oh no,
details,
yeah.
which is
I
an
mean, but
interesting thing.
well, here's
But,
sort of the interesting oddball out himself, and this is sort of like where I talk about full circle.
mhm.
Saw Gerrera,
Yeah.
because you have Saw Gerrera. He appears in Clone Wars that arc, and then he appears in Rogue One, and then Rogue One is kind of where everyone kind of draws from him.
Mhm.
Forrest Whitaker, they always get him back, which is always nice to see him come back. That's kind of the portrayal they go for. But then even when they go back to Bad Batch and Saw's in the Bad Batch, they got the original voice actor back, but you can tell that original voice actor, he's trying to be more like a Forrest Whitaker. Like he even do like the
Yeah.
laugh, and he kind of got like the crazy eyes, and he's sort of like it's a full circle where now even the original actor is kind of taking his portrayal of the character more from the live action movie
Mhm.
that he did even from his original Clone Wars arc at
Right.
the time.
Yeah, I mean that's we know the real world circumstances of that, right? I mean
Hmm.
that's a big part of that. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. And he does a good job, and we really want to connect where this character is going,
Right.
from what we've seen before. Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know too much more to say about that, but yeah, it's a interesting impact. I will say, I mean, going back to Hayden,
Hmm.
he really did have Vader in view whenever he portrayed him. The reason why his pattern of speech, it's criticized in episodes 2 and 3 for being kind of wooden and cardboardy. He was trying to preface and get point towards Vader's delivery. It's just that it's an unhinged, unbound without the armor. It's bound possibly at some points within this is the awkwardness of Anakin's character in a compelling way, right?
Well, Hayden's now actually. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
let me get my point though.
Okay.
Is he's also bound. So it's well, my point is uh, unbound by uh, the Sith armor, the Vader armor is bound in a lot of ways by Jedi tradition and Jedi decorum until it isn't, right? Until
Right.
it's unbound by either of those things. When I killed them, not just the men, the women, and the children. We kind of laugh at that line. It's so visceral and gripping, and I do point that to be the birth of Darth Vader right there in that moment, frankly. And then of course on the hill of Mustafar, I hate you. Yeah, definitely points to that. We do get some moments of that even. It's hard to say. Kind of the I'm just thinking, uh in Empire when Luke rejects him and then he jumps down. There seems to be this kind of deep impact of that, but throughout it's this kind of smoldering That's an interesting thought. I'm just thinking about this now.
And for a trilogy
it-
we watch.
yeah, I'm just thinking about this now. In the prequels, I mean, this is Matthew Stover, right? This is coming from that brilliant novelization. The smoldering flame is
The
being
dragon.
constrained. The dragon being constrained by Jedi decorum and by actual maybe a sense of heroism and I actually do need to be making choices for other people and for the welfare of others. And we have this war to win. This is what it's like to be Anakin Skywalker, right? Then when he's Darth Vader, it's constrained by Palpatine and by the armor,
Mm-hmm.
and it's being harnessed and being stoked,
Mm-hmm.
but also constrained. And of course, Palpatine's downfall. That there's something greater that this dragon turns into a heroic dragon that actually reaches out to save his son. All that to say is, again, Hayden always was referring to Vader, and that in Kenobi, and he said this at the Scotiabank event for Kenobi, and this was really interesting. When he was doing those scenes, especially in the one with the cracked mask,
Mm-hmm.
he would start to think about Anakin, start
Right.
to think about how was I playing Anakin, how was I voicing Anakin, and just pushed him, just kept pushing him darker and darker, but still Anakin. And it's fascinating because I talk about Vader as the attempt to forget Anakin, the failed attempt to forget Anakin. It's such a failure that even the actor can only portray him in continuity,
Well, actually, this
right?
is where something interesting though,
Yeah.
because then you look at Ahsoka,
Yeah.
and he is he is very much going off more what Matthew Wood was going off of than even what his performance in the prequels were. Like he's not really trying to match his prequel performance. He's
No.
trying to match. Is it Matthew Wood? No, not Matthew Wood. Matt Lantern. I always get those two mixed up.
Yeah.
Matthew Wood's Grievous.
Yeah.
That's a difference. That's a difference. That's a different situation.
Mhm.
Because Matt Lantern was very much, and there's evidence to this of like
Mhm.
do something different. There is active evidence of like don't be like Hayden when
Right.
voicing Anakin in the Clone Wars series. They wanted someone a little more cool and suave.
And more
Uh,
lighthearted and playful, right?
they said a mix of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, if I remember.
Yeah.
And and you kind of it's interesting because it's like that's where the show. I mean, obviously, I think the big reason for that is just look who's directing it, and
Mhm.
writing it. It's Dave
Yeah.
Filoni, who worked on the show. So he's kind of taking more of that portrayal of Anakin and putting it in the live action show instead of. Although I guess that's maybe the difference where, like, I think Deborah Chow was looking more to the actual prequel films for
Yeah.
inspiration. Ahsoka, it's prequel related, but it's more to do with the Clone Wars show. If it's like source material.
Yeah. And well,
And
to the point,
mhm.
it's a Kenobi show. It's about Kenobi's story.
That too.
I mean, everything in that world between worlds in Ahsoka is what is Ahsoka's story? What does she need? And of course,
Well, I don't think that has to do with the portrayal of how you're acting. I think that's just. I
no, but
think
I
that
think I think Hayden's choices were determined. Hayden's choice to go to the Matt Lanter route and
right,
Filoni telling him to go to the Matt Lanter route
right,
is because that's in our perception. That's the Ahsoka Anakin we know from Clone Wars.
right,
But Matt Lanter is the Anakin that Ahsoka knows in Clone Wars. You know what I mean? Like in
right,
universe, there's that familiarity, and so who she needs to encounter is, uh, the master that she feels she's let down by leaving. That scene that it does have some influence. That's the tricky thing. It has some impact on Anakin falling to the dark side. But the point is for Ahsoka to say to let go and say Anakin made his choices, right? I have to live. I have to choose to live in the present and for the reality, the needs of the present, and not whatever blame or fault or contribution I made. Um,
mhm,
only knowing war, in only knowing the failures of the Jedi. That's the thing I have to encounter my story in the Clone Wars. I can't really know this. That's the other. Maybe this is a meta commentary here a little bit. Ahsoka isn't in Revenge of the Sith. She doesn't exist as a character, right?
Right. How dare
Um, you know what I mean? Uh,
they?
Ahsoka can't worry about the events of Revenge of the Sith. There's even the moment with Mace Windu, thank you, citizen. Now go away. you know,
Right.
but to say, I mean, this is an interesting thing where the film, by intentionally separating itself out from Clone Wars and Ahsoka, the show,
Right.
shows the relationship between the shows and the film, right? It's just a different way. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at with rupture and continuity. Rupture as change, or reform as change, that acknowledges that is in conversation, but in a way that says I'm going to intentionally be different from you. That is, I mean, that's what we get. I mean, that's what we get in. That's what we get in. I mean, what we see with Rebels, and with her story in Rebels, and with her story in The Mandalorian, right? How
Right.
she's so. I mean, she encounters this whole sense of guilt in Rebels.
Mhm.
She's a lot more stoic too. She's a lot more clipped and a lot more serious and dour, and this whole. I mean, probably because she's affected by, you know, by Vader falling to the dark side, the way Luke was affected by Kylo Ren, probably later in a similar way. You know, she's she's so, she's so dark and down, refusing, like Luke, refusing to embrace the reality, the needs of the present moment, and the needs of the present moment need her to, Hera and Sabine especially needs her to take up that more playful, relaxed, friendly,
Well,
goofy
yeah.
side that she needs to embrace
Right.
again
We'll get into
by
that
going
part a
before.
little
Okay,
bit because I want to move to kind of
sure.
a little bit more to what we're here for, bit book characters a little bit.
That's true.
Because here's the interesting thing, you know, most of the book characters that have been brought into screen are kind of non-characters in a
Yeah.
sense. You have Cobb Vanth, not really much of a character outside of just the blanket. Oh, he got Boba Fett's armor.
Mhm.
So it's like take a little bit of a thing, and then now, everyone's probably gonna rhyme like Timothy Oliphant that they should. Black Chrysanthemum, he didn't really do much. So he's
Yeah.
like big, black Wookiee.
I mean,
Or
Santi in the comics doesn't do that much either. He's more of a fighting.
and
But
then some of
yeah,
the other examples have always kind of been legends things like General Grievous not being like he was in the Dark Horse comics, Spirit into the which is just that's a whole other discussion.
sure.
But that's because that was Legends era. Because and again, Tim's on Thrawn. That's a whole different discussion. Because we haven't really gotten
No.
book characters in their height who are characters. There is a more of a nuance to them. Uh, Appear on screen. We have not seen Afra in any of these shows, so that will be very interesting if she ever gets live action adaptation or animation adaptation. How does that affect the dynamic? Kind of, now that you kind of put an actual actor, or I mean, or actress, or actor into
Yeah.
that character, now you're going to probably want to write because obviously, an actor is going to bring something to the table, much like Lars Mikkelsen brings to Thrawn something to the table, um, as well. So it's gonna be like if there were more Afro comics after an appearance in live action, I'd be very curious to see what those would look like. Um, and then the thing about Acolyte was, High Republic and Vernestra is it's Vernestra 100 years in the future.
Yeah.
I that's that it's like that's like it's not her the teenager which we've been used to. It's like 100 years in the future, she's old. It's not he's not going to be the same by virtue of age. So
Mhm.
it's like you have a lot more wiggle room to go. That's not that character because we're not doing a High Republic show in the middle of the book run, so it's not like we're gonna cast
Yeah.
Jodie Whittaker as Avar Chris, and
Yeah.
then we're gonna write more Avar Chris stories that kind of take in the Jodie Whittaker approach. But I do wonder, is like, is there almost like a cyclical cycle where it's like book character, then gets an actor to kind of portray them, and then now we kind of always base their portrayal kind of a little bit off of what the actor was doing, instead of kind of the more nebulous kind of,
Mhm.
we're making a character just for the books. So, um,
Yeah. I mean, well, what you said, we haven't gotten any book characters that have actually had any sort of
mhm,
real deeper meaning. I mean, Cobb Vanth has an interesting story. It's basically along the same lines as what we get in the Aftermath interludes. They're just
mhm,
interludes. With Vern, I raised the point about Afra, saying maybe she'll be the first to really get a full blown story on screen. I think Vern might be a more substantive role. At least it depends on how much we see of her. But um, there's a reason Leslie Headland's taking in this character. The reason there was the big reveal at Celebration that got leaked to the internet, and of
true,
course
but
we're
she's
all
still
excited.
100 years old.
She's
She's not.
100 years old. I think what I mean though is, at the very least, again, I mentioned how our experience of reading something affects our experience of watching something on screen. At the very least, I'm going to have in mind how 100 years before this, she was this upstart kid who thought she knew everything, and then Starlight Beacon fell, and then now she really doesn't know. I think she doesn't know everything. Everything's turned upside down, and she's becoming a way seeker, and all this stuff. She feels like she failed everybody. Learning from that experience, growing from that experience, is the story of that next 100 years. And so,
Mhm,
any bit of wisdom and insight and experience and maybe integrity she's able to pass on,
mhm.
uh, was learned and earned in those earlier experiences, and that's where I'd say there is sort of a bridge. Yeah, they can do radically whatever they want. It's true. But there's a reason they chose her. The reason they brought her in. Um, so to your point, yeah, we haven't gotten any good examples yet.
Right.
We don't know.
Although, like, maybe I don't know. Maybe Axelay will have like a Force Ghost Avar Crisp made by Jodie
Yeah,
Whittaker. That'd be
that'd be
interesting.
wild.
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 Ahem. Ahem.
If there's any show, that's the thing I keep saying. If there's any show that is going to take the paper to screen swing, it would be the Acolyte. And again, I'm not holding my breath for anything except to say, yeah, I will be reading into this with Vern, even if she's in for 5 minutes. I
And
will be
only
reading into
5 minutes. And only five. And then she dies. I'm kidding. Um.
Yeah, but yeah, if there's anyone to do it, I'd be so excited by something like that with Avar, whatever. But I'm not holding my breath. But this is the show that would do it again with Afra, because we've said this for years though. Because she's so popular, her comics have been so popular, and her growth over both these runs and back
Shocking.
into the Vader run has been so rich,
Hasn't it?
especially under Alyssa Wong's
Mm-hmm.
pen.
Really hurt.
There's more story to tell with this character. It's worth showing it on screen.
Oh yeah.
She's one of the few characters, paper only characters, that everybody knows about.
Shocked it
Uh,
hadn't happened sooner, quite frankly.
yeah,
Uh,
and so that's
uh
weird. And so yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But maybe that ship has sailed a little bit is another possibility. That
maybe
being said,
I
well, I mean, we don't know. Well, she just, spoiler alert again, she just holdoed herself into a planet. So who knows what happened there, which is
right.
gonna be very interesting. I'm sure there's gonna be more to tell, but
I
um,
mean, I didn't put this character in, but I just thought of her right now.
yeah.
Be very curious to see if Kira ever comes back in live action or on
Mhm.
screen, what they're gonna do with that.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like, if it's post Mandoverse, that's a lot of story she went through
Yeah.
in the Civil War. If it's still in that Solo time frame, then okay, that's a little bit more.
Mhm.
You can kind of get away with kind of not having to deal with that and kind of just build off the movie. Um, so that would be very interesting if Kira ever came back. I hope so. I like Kira.
I mean, it would fit with, with Mandalorian. It would fit with Skeleton Crew
Well, I
potentially.
mean, if
You know.
I wonder if will they write her with the knowledge of, all that Crimson Dawn stuff happened to
Right.
her, and she kind of stuff, or she kind of back to her solo, just kind of like only
Mhm.
solo happened, and we get to kind of do whatever we want. So,
Mhm.
but that kind of leads into like my
Mhm.
last and final point of the night, uh, and that is the single creative versus multiple creatives. And this is sort of interesting because Star Wars, when it comes to
Mhm.
like, the legacy characters, Luke, Han, Leia, Vader, the Emperor, they have their single creative. It's George. He's the foundation of it all.
Yeah.
He's sort of what everyone built upon. You know, Thrawn is that again. He's the unique character, but at least on the paper, Tim Zahn is sort of shepherd his character. Obviously, Filoni, the Rebels crew, he has sort of been the singular shepherd behind um these characters. But then you get even someone like Afra, who started with Kieran Gillen and now
Yeah.
went over to Alyssa Wong. Even this, that's just something you can critique. Maybe the sequel trilogy of is like there was no one singular creative to at least give strong enough foundation to really cement who all these characters were.
Mhm.
In a sense, and kind of now, Ray's about to have three creatives, four if we're going to count Trevorrow,
Yeah.
with Tremaine Chenoy and Stephen Knight with her Ray sequel. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of somebody else who's like had multiple creatives, but then you got other characters like Charles Soule's, like Momin. Only Charles Soule's done Momin.
Yeah.
The only one I can't think of that really kind of. I mean, the High Republic is kind of this weird collective situation where it's not like Charles Soule only does the Avar, Elzar, and
Mhm.
I mean, I guess just Ireland's only done the Vern story so far, so maybe there's a little bit of that going on. Seems like a bit of a
Yeah.
hybrid.
Well,
Um,
also before we move on, the thing
yeah,
about High Republic, and this whole we should do a whole episode on this.
good.
High Republic, there are very clearly characters developed by certain creatives, by one creative. We just know that. We know Keith is a Calvin Scott character. We know, Porter is a Charles Soule character. We know Markian is primarily a Charles Soule character, but George Mann has taken him and went nuts with him really
Well, he's
well.
in all
So
the adult novels though, so
yeah, that's true. But the ball, but yeah, maybe, well, that's the example on the other side. Then is
mhm,
that there's creatives who've developed these characters very clearly, like Vern with Justine Ireland is the clearest example.
mhm.
um but then there's also say, hey, I want to pick up this character in this other story. They'll talk and they'll say what the insights and the motivations are, and here, go for it. This is what this character would do. They're also editing each other's work and reading each other's work. So yeah, it's a very, that's the thing. One of the things that makes the Hierobooks so interesting
Mhm.
is this hybrid between these creatives writing their stories in conversation, there's that word again, with all the other creatives, with all these other stories. So it's definitely, it takes up this whole question and really plays with it really, really well and really profoundly and really very in a varying way. So it's a good question. Anyway, sorry, keep
No,
going.
I
What
mean
you were
it.
getting at.
It can work. Like you
Yeah,
look at Legends. There is no real single person shepherding Jason Solo.
true.
For instance, Tim Zahn, I guess, created him because I guess as he created him because I don't know how that happened. Well, that decision was made, but he created him because that's the story where he gets born along with Jaina. But
Yeah.
it's not like
He
Jason
gave
Solo
birth
was
to
like
him.
a ah ha ha ha. You know what I mean.
I know.
It's not like Tim Zahn is sort of shepherding Jason Solo's story trajectory for better and for worse. There
Yeah.
are certain things about the early years for certain, but neither Mara Jade, but other authors kept building off of each other, and Jason Solo got to live to be a full-on adult, from baby to adult.
Yeah.
People weren't happy what Troy Denning did when he made him a Sith Lord and all that, but it was like there's an arc. He dies eventually. I mean, people weren't happy about it, and I don't want to get into the weeds because I'm not. I never read it, so
Mhm.
it's a cool thing. But my point is, Jason Solo did not have a single creative, and yet he got to kind of experience a full fictional life.
Yeah.
So it can work. It
It can.
can it can work.
Yeah.
I guess do we have a preference? I guess to like what do we like? Like, do we like the Filoni kind of like, "Oh, Ahsoka is my character. I decide her trajectory."
Mm.
Because let's face it, he has been the only person who really has in the Rebels characters. Um, and again, people have the authors have their favorites and their little storylines. Like I've
Yeah,
always said, as long as Charles Soule's still writing Star Wars, Dark Droid is going to come back, and so probably Ajax Sigma.
I hope so.
Uh, I'm sure as long as he's still writing on it,
Yeah.
it'll come back. But do we like that kind of like maybe one person shepherds it, or do you think eventually it's like no, eventually let other people. 'Cause, that is what happened with Afra and Alyssa
Mhm.
Wong taking over, even though Gillen originally made the character. So you kind of
Yeah.
seen kind of the pros and cons of both.
I think so I'll answer this by saying the conceptual
Mhm.
through line in this whole episode is um, a character needs to change and needs to have growth and development, unless you're Palpatine. Uh, or else you're not a character. You're not someone we can actually, someone whose story we can actually read and latch on to. And we don't latch on to Palpatine's character. He's a foil for everyone else. We have trouble latching onto Thrawn's character because he doesn't actually really develop or anything. Everyone else has to change and has to come in, and that could require um, new ideas and new perspectives,
Mhm.
and a Ryan Johnson coming in asking those questions. At the same time, it has to be, it's not, again, not uniformity, not the predetermined
Mhm.
thing you were saying off the top.
Mhm.
It's uh, in continuity. It's in something that's believable and understandable and graspable as, oh, this is this character experiencing this thing, and that makes sense, that is well told. I mean, I think maybe even to say another conceptual thing is that our perception of a well told story is one that we follow well, the one that we track with well. We move, that a good our author storyteller is able to carry us through it.
Right.
And so to answer the question, um, you know, I'm good with, say what Filoni has done with Ahsoka has been this very believable, graspable, moving through change.
Mhm.
Um, what Ryan Johnson did with Luke and with Ray is very believable, graspable, moving through change based on what George Lucas and J.J. Abrams and everyone else has set up.
Right.
So, yeah, that's more the criteria. I think if a character, I think the first option, I mean, we get into the J.K. Rowling situation. I think we get to someone. The problem with is real world human egos saying this is my character and this character does what I want it to do, will only ever do what I want it to do and can only do that, and can't actually change or grow, experience anything. Um, versus on the other hand, oh, I don't understand this character, I don't understand this story, so I'm going to throw them into doing something that they wouldn't do. Right?
Can't
That's
really
also bad.
think of something that's happened with that in
Well,
Star
you
Wars.
talked about Thrawn having a
Oh yeah,
friend, right?
that's true. I mean, that's Star Wars.
Versus,
That's
or unless you say if you're starting with Thrawn having a friend, you talk about Thrawn torturing and taunting Hera for having her dead brother,
right.
or family, So there's the example. Again, I think what's more important is, uh, yeah, well, I guess there's the two dangers, right? Of
I mean,
a
I'll
singular crew. Let me just summarize the
okay.
point. There's the two dangers of uh, a singular creative having so much control and yet not having the creativity uh, to move the character through change, or a new creative coming in and not having the deeper understanding of that character's story and that character's growth and how that has affected that character, and then just sticking them off into this weird other direction that doesn't make sense. So whether or not it's the same person, if it's the same person all the time, or if it's a new creative coming in, as long as it is a believable, realistic development, I'm good with it. to summarize.
Well, I mean, I'll give you the good version of J.K. Rowling. That's Tolkien, because Tolkien is only made Middle Earth. But to be fair, Tolkien also never wanted Lord of the Rings to become a franchise. In fact, he probably would have hated all the movies and all the shows. So it's like he just wanted to make his fantasy world. So it's sort of like that's the good version. But that's because it's like he didn't really care about the money. He just
to
wanted
be fair to Harry Potter, the character, and all those characters, they do definitely grow through change, and that's why we're so compelled by them. It's just a bunch of other things in the real world that have made things problematic. But
well, Star Wars at least is a franchise that wants to at least bring in other people to try out Luke Skywalker story.
True. I mean, well, that's another thing is that Star Wars at its best is always given opportunities to newer people, newer folks. For the Fakpov novels, the Fakpov, those short stories, those are always these testing grounds to say, can you tell a character story that's new and interesting based on what little bit we have? But they're not allowed to touch the big three,
right? So yeah, I think we've covered it. I mean, did we get everything we want to talk about the High Republic in here too?
No, we'll save that for another episode. I will say, just to add on to the point before, though, again, George Lucas developed Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. My favorite comic book of all time is someone else other than George Lucas. His name is Charles Soule, reflecting on everything that George Lucas gave us about Anakin and Vader. So, different character, different creative coming in.
Yep, that's all she wrote. But yes, I think that should do it. This went a bit long. We had a lot to talk about the first half, but thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for all the lovely comments. We love comments. Put more comments. Put comments after the show. We want your comments.
There we go. And again, please do comment below. Those comments aren't going anywhere. The comment boxes aren't going anywhere. So give us some love, show us some feedback. If you disagree, if you thought something we said was completely ridiculous and off the wall, you couldn't stand it,
rant to us. We will read your rant.
As long as it's tasteful and respectful and thoughtful and no, not mean, or not something that we'll have to delete. That. But comment below. Please do give this video a like and a share. Follow, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at GID2021, again, GID2021 on Twitter. Also, sometimes I am at the Ion Canon Pod Twitter, Ion Canon Pod. Of course, you can always find me on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Hopefully, not this week, but hopefully next week we will have a game night. We're taking a pause from the Grand Marathon. We're still on Young Jedi Adventures. It's fun. We're still going it. We said we were going to do all of it on screen. We're determined. Wouldn't it be something if we could watch Acolyte? But I don't think we'll be finished. But I think we'll be way done with Young Jedi Adventures. Hopefully by August. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's coming out in August. I'm just guessing. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, I will make you a guarantee. If you're in the Discord and you tag Joel on a question, 100% guarantee he'll answer within 5 minutes. I don't know about that, but definitely react. Yeah, I keep saying this. You and Ben have done a really great job keeping the lights on in there. So I'm getting in there more, commenting in there a bit more. So definitely in there. Follow me on Instagram and Threads at MNAUG1138, Twitter at NEUG485. Again, I got a whole bunch of things going on there. Star Wars, probably a lot of Taylor Swift, even a bit of NFL playoffs these days, including Taylor Swift in the NFL playoffs, stuff like that. Soccer's coming around the corner, different things, and all those interests that I happen to have. Of course, at Ion Canon Pod, EYEON CANONPOD, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Although Instagram, I do Insta stories every now and then. Sure, why not? And also, of course, Tractor Beam this Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, where we're talking about the Blue Guy, and we're also talking about Zine and
Marcion Rowe.
Marcion. No, we're talking about. Well, maybe Marcion Rowe might show up in.
That's right. That
you are talking
about Thrawn alliances.
We are talking about Thrawn as well. So definitely check that out. And whoever you're in the comments right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. Of course, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, they got their streams going up periodically. Keep an eye out for them on their channel. Of course, the Ray side on her channel, Hannah, pretty much every day. And then the flagship right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, Thursdays. They're definitely going to spend, I'm guessing, the whole episode talking about this trailer, or at least a good chunk. Most of the episode, I don't know, but you can ask them, because they have asked SW, what percentage? Ask Ben this. What percentage of this video? I'm going to do that. That's my troll question for the week. That's what I'm going to do. There we go. But yeah, definitely check that out for that great discussion. And yeah, you can also catch all of our Iron Canon episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts shortly after we finish recording. I get that up onto the audio podcatchers, so check it out there. But yeah, that's all she wrote. See you next week. We're talking about the impact of the prequels on the expanded universe. A paper or screen to paper pipeline there. In the year of 1999 to 2005, a glory era for Star Wars storytelling. At least I think so.
Yeah, it really was.
There we go. So we're getting a guest in for that as well, first time guest. So that'll be a good time. And in the next week after that, we got some things lined up for that too. So thanks for joining us, Joel. It's been great conversation. Till then, let's blow this thing and head home.